third, Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. And you are at City Hall for the meeting of the Common Council of the City of Wausau. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next up will be Clerk Leslie with the roll call, but don't push your button until she says you should.
No Michael tonight?
You may begin voting. There are 10 members present tonight, and Alder Martins is excused.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. The next item on our agenda are proclamations, and we have a ton of them. So I'm just going to read the titles, and if you are interested, we have them on our website, or you can get hard copies from the clerk's office. Emergency Medical Services Week, Aging and Disability Resource Center Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, Brain Tumor Awareness Month, Foster Care Month, Hmong American Veterans Memorial Day, Mental Health Awareness Month, National Nurses Month, National Water Safety Month, and a Community for All, which we will be talking about in more depth shortly. All right. The next item on our agenda is pre-registered citizens for matters appearing on the agenda and other public comment. All right, the first person, you'll have 3 minutes, so I will give you, I'll call you up and you can give your name and address for the record, and we'll love to hear from you. The first person I have is Patrick Bacher.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Bacher, and I live at 505 South 22nd Avenue here in Wausau. Good evening, City Council, Council President McElhaney, and Mayor Rosenberg. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening and would like to share how momentous the Mayor's executive proclamation, A Community for All, is for the City of Wausau. My name is Patrick Bacher, and I live here in the city with my husband, Richard. I'm a mental health professional, and he is a truck driver. He's given me the rare permission for him to speak as well. Anyone in a committed relationship with strong personalities can understand the trust level that requires. We were one of 4 couples married here at the Marathon County Courthouse on June 12, 2014. This was the first day marriage was made possible in the history of Marathon County. We made a slight window of opportunity before legal counsel shut down marriage equality to shake out the details. There was state debate over the ability to accept marriage equality. Our marriage certificate lists me as wife, just to explain in part the new ground we were forging. To commemorate this fight for equality, I wouldn't change a thing about it. This July, we'll be celebrating 16 years together. That's 16 years together in the city of Wausau. Wausau is the city we chose. Wausau is the city we love. Rich is a native, and I'm a Pointer by birth. We built some wonderful friendships, connections, and careers here. Tonight, we feel proud to live here. I could share stories of discrimination, dirty looks, and character smear campaigns, but I'm not here to address that. We've been following and supporting the work of the Diversity Affairs Commission and Marathon County. Our own county board failed to pass a similar unifying and accepting resolution. To say that I'm disappointed with their lack of leadership and the message they sent out across Marathon County and the world would be an understatement. But I'm not here for that either. I'm here to express elation and joy. I'm here to express feelings of validation and belonging. I'm here to express appreciation and gratitude. The proclamation of a community for all in the city of Wausau means that our struggles for respect and acceptance are recognized by our government. I wish to thank Mayor Rosenberg and her team of County Board Supervisors Kyle Lowe, William Harris, and Yi Zhang. In declaring Wausau a community for all, you show your passion for building unity, recognition that diversity fosters strong communities, and that inclusion welcomes everyone to participate at the table. Some may argue a proclamation won't change the hearts or minds of everyone, but it opens the door. It's a responsive start. It lights the way for building community, improving our diversity, and making our hometown welcoming. This isn't revolutionary, but in the current climate, it feels as if it is. I will share an excerpt of the CFA proclamation. The City of Wausau recognizes diversity, equity, and inclusion, and equity as essential to positive and healthy lives, and is committed to ensuring people of all perspectives and experiences feel welcome and safe in the community. Everyone is included in this proclamation. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that the beauty of a strong community? I can't speak for all diverse and vulnerable populations, but I can indeed say I am here with you and I am here for you. We may not share the same experiences, but we can all work together to support each other. That's what strong communities do. We work together. Thank you, Mayor Katie. The message you sent out is strong. It is clear, and it speaks to all of us. We feel seen, safer, and hopeful for our future in Wausau. To borrow your own words from your message says, I value you, I care about you, and I need you here. We definitely feel all of the above, and we feel thankful for your strength of character, compassion, and leadership. Wausau is indeed a community for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I want to just make sure we all recognize decorum. I want you all to feel included no matter what your viewpoint to. Thank you. Next person, Bruce Grau.
I'm Bruce Grau, 1115 North 10th Street. And as a representative of the Poor People's Campaign and a Wausau citizen, I'm speaking in favor of a Wausau Affordable Housing Task Force based on what we know and what we can expect. We know that housing security is a requirement for stability of one's job and health. When evictions go up, so does unemployment and sickness. We know Wausau has a great need for affordable housing as 254 Wausonians sit on a waiting list for low-income housing. They need help now. At least 336 households are overcrowded. At least 31% live in unaffordable housing. At least 42% of renters and 21% of homeowners spend over 30% of their what's accepted in their income for housing. And nationally, for every one homeless person, there are 5 empty units. We know Wausau has an overabundance of substandard homes, which are unsafe, energy efficient, and costly, leading the country. We can expect the CDC eviction moratorium to end as soon as the end of next month, affecting up to 75,000 Wisconsinites. We can expect many will be facing insurmountable debt and have extremely challenged ability to acquire affordable housing or re-rent. We can expect that many of those dispossessed in the county will come here to Wausau. And we can expect the prices of homes to continue to rise, particularly as multi-billionaires suck up millions of defaulted homes and properties, many at exorbitant prices, monopolizing realty. This will result in working people being unable to buy even a modest home. You see the signs around town, we buy homes. Well, that's a movement, and it's taking advantage of human misery by stealing homes away from working people and low-income people. The time was yesterday to prepare Wausonians for this tsunami. The time is today to vote in favor of this task force to help determine the best way forward, to include impacted citizens in the group, to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity given us with the $15.6 million through the American Rescue Plan. to meet immediate basic needs of working, poor, and low-income workers, and to establish a long-term process by which housing security needs for working people will be adequately addressed, underscoring in practice that we are indeed a community for all. As we will not be saying, you don't belong in our glossy photo of high-end condos and retail celebrating the best small city in America, but welcome to Wausau. We take care of our own. Come join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person I have is LaTanya Campbell.
Good evening. Thank you for this time this evening, and thank you for your service as elected officials. In preparation for this meeting, I reviewed the city's mission and core values. It states that in response to our citizens, we will provide services in the most effective and efficient manner in order to promote and enhance our living environment, plan and encourage positive growth, and promote a positive community image by encouraging citizens' involvement and civic pride. It states that you value professionalism, accountability, integrity, which includes leading by example, and respect, treating everyone how you would want to be treated. When a friend tells you that they're hurting, do you say, "So am I? It is not that bad," or that you're lying? No, you empathize and you ask how I can help. When a doctor who has experience, knowledge, and evidence-based research to support their claims tell you that you have a condition, do you deny? No. You might get a second opinion or do some research, but then you plan accordingly. Under the About tab, it says, "Welcome home to Wausau." It is a different experience when someone invites you to your home and they usher you right to your seat and you just sit and talk, compared to when someone invites you into their home and say, "My home is your home. Here's the bathroom. You're more than welcome to have a snack or a beverage. Please help yourself." I want your home to be my home. I want to feel welcome, accepted, and embraced. I am appointed member of both the Marathon County Diversity Affairs Committee and also the city's Liberation and Freedom Committee. Both are designed to advocate and elevate the voices of marginalized communities. As community leaders, we have the responsibility and a duty to do what is right, even when it's hard. As Americans, we have a big emphasis on constructive feedback. We want to know what is working and where there's opportunity for growth. The 2019 Life Report survey revealed that more than 1/3 of respondents encountered one or more instances of discrimination, a 7% increase from 2017. It also revealed a decline in satisfaction in how welcoming and tolerant this community is. They issued a call to action to create a community that is diverse, inclusive, and everyone has a sense of belonging. The Community for All resolution in itself is feedback. This is not the first attempt at bridging the gap. I have participated in events such as Beyond the Headlines, People for the Power of Love programs, and Towards One Wausau story circles for community dialogue and on inclusivity and acceptance. The Community for All resolution seeks to have a community's leader reaffirm its commitment to welcome, embrace, and accept marginalized communities. It seeks to bring awareness to adverse outcomes both locally and nationally for marginalized communities. The first step of any kind of change is awareness, then acknowledgement. The resolution seeks to make you aware. Now, this is your opportunity to empathize and acknowledge some of the experiences of marginalized communities so that you're able to help, so that we can begin to have the conversation to make Wausau a home for all. Please vote in favor for the resolution when it comes up, and thank you, Mayor Rosenberg, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. The last person I have who has signed up for comment is Deb Ryan.
Good evening, Deborah Ryan. I live at 702 Elm Street. It happens that I have been interested in affordable housing since back in 2000, and have been on a number of consortiums that are representing our community. It happens Pam Anderson, who is the past chair of the Housing Coalition that used to meet at United Way, and I believe she was in that role for over 10 years, retired and is not able to come tonight. I had, in the last month, gotten data from the Community Development Housing Authority about our Section 8 vouchers, the residents that are living at Riverview Towers, those residents that are living at scattered site housing that's affordable, and gave a kind of overview of what the average family size was, age, income as such, without any type of personal information. And I wanted to share that in the past with the City Council and Economic Development, and the mayor would not allow that. And so I do feel that we as a community need to know more information without not even being able to see it. So Pam Anderson had given me an email to kind of give a better idea of what issues we have in our community. So these are her words. Hi Deb, I did a quick search for updated housing data for Wausau MSA and Marathon County. I found some 2020 updates, but some data not updated since 2018. Here is some of what I found. From the Urban Institute 2018 Marathon County data, 37 affordable rent units per 100 extremely low-income households. National Low Income Housing Coalition outreach of 2020, one-bedroom fair market rent is $600. Hourly wage needed to afford a one-bedroom is $11.54. Rent affordable at minimum wage, $7.25, would be an apartment rent of $377. Work hours per week at minimum wage to afford a one-bedroom is 64 hours. This is using side notes of 30% of income on rent, and a person earning $9 an hour can afford rent of $468. A person earning $12 an hour can afford rent of $624. And for HUD in 2021, one-bedroom fair market rent is listed at $618. From the Alice report from the United Way, the total number of households are 17,340. The percentage of Alice in poverty households is 46%. The household survival budget for 28, cost of household basics outpaces the wages. The housing monthly cost is $494, where you need an hourly wage of $10.45 an hour. I want you to be aware of this information as we look at direction on task force, or in some instances, Tom Neal and I are on the Community Development Housing Authority, which has been in existence for decades, and so can look at some projects and maybe the student housing and looking at potentially converting it into affordable housing. If others are interested in this data, here are extra copies. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is communications, delivery of new fire truck, but as evidenced by the lightning outside, we're going to delay that one until our June meeting so we can all enjoy it a little more. All right, the next item on our agenda is presentation from me. I thought maybe it'd be important to talk about the events of the last week and put it in context. I know probably not everybody on City Council has been paying attention to County Board, and frankly, I hadn't been paying as close attention as maybe I should have been. So I put together this presentation. If there are questions, we can talk about them, and then we can also talk about what the next steps look like for our community. So is Wausau a community for all, and what the heck just happened? So the first slide here, you see this New York Times article, A Community for All, not so fast as this Wisconsin County. And then obviously, here's a post from Channel 7 that says, conservative speaker says, mayor is on board to exterminate an entire race. Then there's a Wisconsin Daily Herald, or Wausau Daily Herald post that says, Wausau area leaders condemned members of an anti-Black Lives Matter group who falsely said Mayor Katie Rosenberg wants to exterminate black people. You can see here there's an apology press release from the county board chair, and then there's a press release from a couple of school board members, all kind of about the same topic. So what I wanted to do was kind of talk about what led to this and all of this. So I think it's important that we start last year at this time, and it's also important to acknowledge that today is the 1-year anniversary of the George Floyd killing, and it's been kind of a year since then. So in June 2020, Wausau had the biggest political demonstration of all of our lifetimes, with almost 2,000 people demonstrating in favor of Black Lives Matter and just making a big peaceful demonstration. So since that time, members of the Marathon County Board Diversity Affairs Commission have been working on a resolution. I thought it was important that you saw their faces, the people, because you probably recognize them. They live in our community. They serve our community in a lot of different ways. You might see a lot of them actually right here in the audience tonight because they have a stake in our discussion too. So they've been debating this since June 2020. They initially called it Marathon County is no place for hate, and then changed course when that was controversial, and they changed it to Marathon County is a community for all. And from what I gathered from reading and the comments, and probably some comments that we've heard from people here when we have discussions about what diversity means and what we do when it comes to diversity, is that term equity. It seems to be one of the terms that kind of lights people off, and it's been causing some consternation. I know that we've had some public comment that people don't like equity. So I think that will be important as we continue this discussion to define what does equity mean for us. I think it's also important to note that, we have some shared members of the Liberation and Freedom Committee. That's the Wausau committee that was created in 2018, and the Marathon County Diversity Affairs Commission. And in March of this year, they actually voted in favor of, unanimously, they affirmed their support for that Marathon County Board, a Community for All resolution. Now, since then, we haven't taken action on it. I think it's probably important that we do kind of acknowledge the work that the committee here has done and build on it. But that's kind of the work that's been done when it comes to Wausau on this. And then in April, in an attempt to kind of figure out, okay, where can we agree on a community for all? What do we need to know? So you can see they held a town hall meeting at Whitewater. And then that is when Wisconsin Public Radio covered the town hall. We can see here there was a bunch of comments at the county board at some point that led the Rural Record Review to write an editorial that basically said, people are saying that rural people don't care about diversity, and that's just not true. So kind of everyone was weighing in at this point. This is April, this is last month. You've probably heard a little bit more about it by this time. And then at the beginning of May, I got a call, and it's from this gentleman, a reporter from the New York Times. And he said, you know what, I'm working on a Wausau story for the New York Times, and I was hoping to speak to you about it. So of course, when someone calls me and they want to talk about Wausau, I want to talk to them. So I called him back. And it was clear right off the bat that he was talking about this Marathon County Board resolution situation, and that he had talked to several people already about what was going on here. So he was looking for my point of view, and I think that, and I told him that I thought it was a damaging discussion that was taking place, and I was hoping that the county board would pursue the better angels here, and that, of course, led us to the point of the executive committee meeting maybe 2 weeks ago. After that call from the New York Times article, I knew that I couldn't just sit around and wait to see what kind of an article that he was going to publish about us. So that's when I took it upon myself to go to the executive committee of the Marathon County Board and give public comment, because, you know what, I am the mayor. I think it's important that I give our viewpoint. And so what I did there was I literally quoted these points from the Wausau Region Chamber of Commerce's economic outlook plan, and why diversity is important economically. Because I thought, you know what, if we can't get on board with this stance economically, I don't know where we're at. So These are the action items I encouraged them to add, using this resolution as an opportunity to sign on to the Greater Wausau Prosperity Project's goals of developing, attracting, and retaining diverse and skilled workforce and talented individuals, using it as a catalyst to support nurturing and growing and attracting diverse technology-enabled companies, and using it as a commitment to support our community in developing quality places and amenities to attract the best and brightest of every background. And again, those quotes are from the Economic Outlook you probably all have seen already from the 2019 Wausau Region Chamber of Commerce. So at that meeting, they voted it down. They did not approve the resolution. So it failed 6-2. There were 2 members not present. And then they also voted in favor of bringing an educational presentation from a group I've actually never heard of until last week, and then I heard of them a whole lot. It's called Every Black Lives Matter. And then the article was published on Tuesday. And, we can focus on all of the negative things in the article, what it said about Wausau. But I want to focus on these people who we see right here because, they, despite the negativity in the article, they said, we have to keep having this conversation. We have to be pushing for equity and recognition, or else nothing changes. And I just think it's so important to point this out. LaTanya in this article says, so it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but with my children and my grandchildren, I'm fighting for them, for other people's children and grandchildren. All our forefathers, if they would have stopped fighting, we wouldn't have anything. And she's exactly right. And we have the chair of the Diversity Affairs Commission, Yilang Zhang, who talked about the business effects. And then obviously we have Supervisor Will Harris, who stood up and really asked his colleagues to change their mind. Some of his comments were, tugged at your heartstrings. He wants to feel like he's a part of this community. I want a lot of our residents that are saying he wants to contribute to our community. He wants to feel a part of the community. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that article. I'm sure you've read it. You all know about it. And at that point, I'd been kind of talking to Yilang and Ka and Will all day, and we decided that it was important that we took a stand on where we were. So I took the county resolution, I turned it into a proclamation, I added some Wausau things, and we took it upon ourselves to talk to the community about how we wanted them to feel included, and what we have expectations for coming up next. And obviously, it was an important step for us to take. It's not the only step, and it was tough. It was a tough day. I think everybody's voice was shaking when you heard them speaking about it, just because it was kind of shocking. And obviously, the backlash all day, and still, I'm not caught up on any kind of calls and emails, but the backlash we got from that article, people thinking that was us, the Wausau City Council, people thinking that was me. You can see, I think I got most of the profanities out of this, but there was a lot of backlash, and we still continue to get it. People calling us backwards, people calling the people we represent subhuman, and it's unfortunate that that's where we are. But that's where we are. I don't know if you've been getting it. I'm sure you've seen some of the comments on the national articles. And then the educational presentation at County Board, and this is from this person who is an anti-Black Lives Matter organization. It was politics. He did his own thing. He had his message. But throughout that presentation, he continued to call me out, saying that I support the extermination of Black people, which obviously I don't. I don't think I should have to sit here and tell you that I don't, but for the record, I do not support genocide. I do not support the extermination of Black people. I find it reprehensible. That led to a press release from the county board chair saying that, he should have interrupted. And I think that goes to show all of us as chairs of meetings that even when we agree with people, we need to step in and say, hey, we need to recognize decorum. It's important that anybody coming to, all of the public, anybody coming here, don't call members of bodies out. Don't call members of the other elected bodies out. Say your comments and do say what you support. Support or don't support. Maybe you don't support a policy, but really work on not making it personal, because at that point it's just politics. So here we are. That's us. And we have some decisions to make about the step we want to make as a city and where we want to go from here. Now, these are just the steps that I've kind of identified that you could take. Now, you don't have to. I've talked to the Chair of Economic Development, and Alder Neal has agreed that, since we have a recommendation from the Liberation and Freedom Committee, he will take that. And, you could decide that you want to send a letter of support to the county board and saying, hey, we support this resolution of a community for all. That's important for us to say. You could do that. You could say, you know what, maybe that's not enough. Maybe we want to have our own resolution of a Wausau Community for All. I did have some pressure from folks who wanted me to have you all vote on a Wausau Community for All resolution tonight. I don't know that that's fair to you because you haven't been able to really do the work on it. You could easily just take the proclamation and make it into a resolution and get it done, but I do think it's important to have the conversations. I think that the Economic Development Committee needs to have the conversation with the Liberation and Freedom Committee. I think that's important and expected. And I think one of the most important things we can do as we move forward, we are interviewing firms for our upcoming strategic plan, which I'm very excited about. And I think it's going to be important that no matter what we decide, that we move forward with diversity embedded in that plan, equity embedded in that plan. As LaTanya has told me before, we need to look at our policy making through a multicultural lens, and we need to make sure that we're doing that. So I think that is something we can do right off the bat when we start strategic planning. We'll just make it so. And I think we also need to consider what do we want our Liberation and Freedom Committee, our Diversity Committee, what do we want them to do, and how do we empower them to do that? Now, before the kind of chaos of last week, I had been having conversations with the chair of the county board and also the chair of the Diversity Affairs Commission and our chair of Liberation and Freedom. And I was thinking, maybe we don't need to be having these separate conversations. I mean, government, we all are we have shared goals and shared values. Like, why are we having separate conversations when we can have a better conversation together and have more minds? So maybe that's what we look at. I don't know how I feel about that right now, sitting here after last week, but you know what, I'm never going to slam that door. I always want to continue having that conversation. And I think it's also on you all, on this body, to decide what you want to do with that. Decide how you want to empower that committee. And I think we owe it to them to give them very specific direction because it's been pretty vague. And I think we do need to work on that. So the one thing that's clear is that the city of Wausau is going to have to lead, and that's you. You're going to have to lead. You're going to have to decide how we move forward from this. We can only control ourselves and what we vote on and how we discuss things. And I know that we are committed to moving forward together, but it's on all of us here. So just want to make that clear. I can do things by myself. I can make my own proclamations, but it's definitely on you as the policymakers to continue this discussion and make it real for our community. I'll be there with you, I promise. So thank you. That's all I have. I guess if there's anybody that would like to make a comment or have a question on the presentation, I would welcome that from this body. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say and thank you for standing strong for this community. I know it's been a tough week, and I could even hear it in your voice up there. And I just want to say thank you for being our mayor, and thank you for being strong.
Thank you. Alder Neal.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the work you've been doing. I appreciate it very much. As far as bringing it to the ED committee, I feel it's not only appropriate, it's really important. It's really sad that I can't just speak to it in terms of it's the right thing to do to just, be good humans. But from the perspective of the ED committee, it's vitally important for the city as we try to achieve goals that we nurture and exhibit an image in the marketplace that paints us as welcoming and a community for all. I think that what's happened at the board was definitely a backward step, and the ripple effect comes back on the city. And we've seen that because people just specifically talking about Wausau. as they react to the unfortunate things we've seen. So I really welcome this at ED. I hope to see 100% involvement and approval of this and sending it forward as a resolution to the full council so we can act as a body and show what Wausau is really about. So, thank you again.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and yes, thank you for making the proclamation. And you had referenced it during your presentation. Yes, I suggested that we vote on a municipal level community for all resolution, and I sit on the Liberty and Freedom Committee, and I still think we should do that as soon as possible. And I do see a perspective on economics and image, but I think we really lose what's important in some of this. It is my opinion that we are not talking about market dynamics, and equality. The importance of equality is not about a profit and loss statement. It is because it is just, and it is because it is right. So I think, fine, if it works into economic factors, so be it. But I think that it's an element of humanity and community that takes priority on this. So I think this is a good step forward, and in not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. I think that we begin to implement as soon as possible corresponding relevant policy actions and reform that make it loud and clear that these are not just words, but that we will walk, and when we walk, we will stand up tall. So I support this, and I look forward to supporting it further. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I don't see anyone else wishing to speak, but thank you very much for listening. All right. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. I just want to point out that file number 210511, there was a bit of housekeeping. It was uploaded to your packet later this afternoon, so it might look a little different depending on when you update it, but it's just housekeeping. So I'd be looking for a motion on file number 210501 through 210523 on the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Larson. Do I have a second? Second by Peckham. Any discussion? Okay, I think we're ready whenever you are.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you very much. All right, next item on our agenda, resolutions and ordinances, mayor's appointments. I don't have any. So we'll move on to file number 210517. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee authorizing city officials to enter into a professional services agreement with Ellers Public Finance Advisors to provide independent investment advisory. I don't know if do you want to share anything about it, or, okay. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Herbst. Do I have a second? Second by Neal. Any discussion? Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the Community Development Authority noontime meeting today, which Alder Tom Neal and I are both on, as well as our mayor did attend. And we had learned that the Betty Noel and her staff are managing their general fund investments where they're getting a rate of 0.15%. And in talking with Betty after the meeting, I learned that pretty much they're just going with their bank funds, that the actual certificates of a deposit are pretty much about the same. So I guess I question why we need someone to manage our cash from the federal dollars that back in the 80s when I was accountant at Northeastern Wisconsin Technical College, the finance director and I, in fact, one time I picked up a check from the city of Green Bay for $500,000 for my first time, and it's like, wow. But I brought it back and it was deposited into our account. But we also took those regular funds and planned when we needed it for cash flow. And I do feel that with Mary Ann and I think the assistant controller are both CPAs, that I think that they can handle that without us having to pay for a consultant. Thank you.
Yes, if you would like to address about the nature and attributes of our relationship that we would be entering into.
Will do. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Phil Cosson with Ellers. New face to some of you, old face to others that have been on the council for a while. You know, we had a rather lengthy discussion about a service. This is not a service that we have typically provided to the city. Investment services we've done, as many of you are aware, bond issue work for the city. We'll be talking about that later on. And we've also done other special study type work for the city. With the unknown of the American Recovery Act funds, and again, there's a lot of guidance coming out on a weekly basis about how to use those funds and what's eligible, more importantly. It was thought by the staff, city staff, working with Ellers, that we could kind of manage what the flow of funds would be over time, assist with the investment of those funds, try to maximize return, but make sure you have liquidity to ensure that you have the funds when you decide what projects are going to kind of percolate to the top for the use of those funds. Those funds really can be used for over a 3-year period, so there's no real rush at the moment. I know you want citizen input as it pertains to how those funds will be used. So this was an approach to assist city staff with investment of these funds to make sure that you're maximizing, again, the investments, the return, but also the liquidity to make sure the funds are available when you need them.
Thank you. Are there any other? Yes, Alder Ryan.
I guess I still question that we do have staff that are capable to do that. And with this federal funding, I think we need to be looking at it very conservatively. We are not talking Trump and junk bonds as a way to get a better return. I mean, there are treasury bills, there are certificates of deposit. But to end up paying a fee of 0.07%, when as of today, from the Housing Authority, they're getting 0.15%, why should we pay that as an additional expense when it's something, we do have staff that are capable to do that. Thank you.
If I can add one comment,
Sure.
We're not going to be in junk bonds. The city has an investment policy, first of all. We'll make sure that we manage the money to make sure it fits your investment policy. But second, state of Wisconsin, all municipalities, there's guidance as to where funds can be invested. So we'll make sure that it's secure, it meets your investment policy, and again, meeting the liquidity issue that gives you flexibility in the future.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. We had talked about this at length in finance in our last meeting as well, and one of the things that we were interested in working with Ellers as the city's financial planner is that there are some synergies between the services they provide for us in that bond counsel role, and even working through our budgets, and this type of counsel as well. And so there are relationships and synergies to be developed between various fund sources. There may be additional grant funding coming that can be paired with this to maximize the outcome. The other thing that we're interested in is that perspective, because Ellers is working in this capacity with a number of other communities. And so we can gain that insight without tasking our city staff to spend time on their listserv, finding out from other finance directors what might have worked wherever. I mean, we can get that well-rounded approach. And so from a financial planning standpoint, having them assist us and walk hand in hand with, the investment and the use of these funds, because they are a one-time fund source. And so obviously we don't want to create things that represent continual and long-term costs, but we also want to make the maximum impact we can make, because we really get one shot to manage this money and figure out how to best do that. And so working hand in hand with our financial planner to make sure that we're making those sound decisions and that those things are in parity with everything else we want to achieve certainly makes sense. So that's why we were supportive of it.
Thank you. Alder Neal.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I'm one of the people that recognize your face for years now. You know, with the unpredictability of, attrition on staff, our finance director could decide to move to Norway, tomorrow.
No.
I don't know.
No.
And we could literally be held, just left holding the bag. With years of partnership and your, intimate knowledge of our situation and whatnot, that element of continuity is vitally important. And it should be something we should never overlook, because that right there is a resource in our back pocket that is predictable and from my standpoint, very, very valued. So thank you.
Thank you. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I've done this back in the early 80s, and it's not difficult. You just put together a spreadsheet and call your different banks and get that information. And both Mary Ann and her other accountants, and she does have another CPA, are capable to do this. I understand Mr. Ehlers has the expertise in the bond market, but this is just managing the federal funds, which could be certificates of deposit or looking at what is the best bank return. You're not trying to do anything risky because we need to save every dollar, even if the interest rates are low. But again, do you really want to pay him a commission of 0.07 when the rate of return is 0.15%? To me, as an accountant and a colleague for Mary Ann, she can handle it. Let's handle it, let her handle it, and her staff, and save some money. Thank you.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'll be the first person to say that I have the utmost faith in our staff and their skill set, but I will also say that if anything were to go wrong in this process, we all represent a constituency that would be the first people to line up and say that we were ill-equipped to make these decisions and that we failed to seek the appropriate advice. So at the end of the day, we are taking a proactive step to make sure that we have that parity, we have that skill set in this is the city's financial planner. This is what he does. He helps us borrow money. He helps us take on debt. He helps us analyze what we can afford and what we can't afford on an annual basis. Why would we not want that skill set when we are trying to figure out how to get the largest impact we can get out of $15.6 million? I mean, we want that counsel. And we've been criticized in the past for failing to take steps like this to ensure that we're getting the best possible outcomes. So I think that this certainly makes sense, and I think that we should be supportive of those efforts.
Thank you. Alder Peckham. I might need you to turn the mic on.
Turned it off instead of on. I agree with Ms. Rasmussen and others who feel this is a good move to hire this firm. It's a very complicated thing. It's not like a pot of money that's sitting there and you're doling some out periodically. It's $15 million, and my opinion is that if you do that, if you want to be responsible to the community, you bring in the A-team to help manage it.
Thank you. Alder Watson.
And this might be just because I'm a newbie. So what are the limitations that municipalities have when investing? And is there like not a sample, but like these are the kinds of investment instruments we could look into? And then do you know those rates? I mean, are they, are we stuck going with CDs or?
Well, I'm going to start by telling you that I'm not the investment advisor. I'm your municipal advisor. We have a group that does this. Tammy in our office and a few others in our office that do this work. So I didn't realize I was going to be talking investments tonight. I'm not supposed to be because I'm not a registered investment advisor. So there is, again, you have a policy, the city has an existing policy, along with layered on top of what's allowed within the state. And there are opportunities beyond CDs, absolutely. The term of how long you want to invest the funds will dictate rate, along with the security. So that will be worked through, if you work with us, we'll work through those options with staff to make sure that whatever we bring forward is going to be secure for the city.
Thank you. Alder Watson.
So I think it sounds like a valuable service to sign on for. I mean, the potential for earning is going to be greater than something we could just do based on what staff, maybe the limited time staff would have. So, I mean, we want to maximize these funds for our citizens. We want to make sure we get the biggest bang for our buck. So, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it looks like we are ready to vote, but don't push your button yet.
Please vote.
Oh, do push your button.
Motion passes 8-2.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are moving on to file number 210519. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee authorizing the issuance and establishing the parameters for the sale of not to exceed $5,655,000 in general obligation promissory notes, Series 2021A. I guess maybe you just give us a little brief on this.
Yes, it's me again. So we have two issues. We've been working for the last year or so with city staff again to put together these two financings. And I'm going to walk through the first one, and then I'll go into the second one. If you want, I can do both at the same time. I'll let you dictate.
We vote on them
pace.
separately, so maybe we'll just keep them separate if that works
Okay.
for you.
We'll do that. Thank you. So again, this is relatively new for some of you that haven't gone through a bond issue, and I want to first kind of give you an idea of what we're looking to finance. But then second, I want to go through the process, because there's a process you have to go through. And then third, we are, again, through Finance Committee, looking to kind of change the type of sale that we're looking to do here, and I'll talk about that in some detail. In your packets, we have a pre-sale report, and that pre-sale report is in your packet because it kind of lays out all the components of the, in this case, this general obligation promissory note. So there's notes and bonds in the municipal world, and notes are an amortization of schedule that has a payment schedule of 10 years or less, and anything over 10 years is bonds. So you'll see we have one note issue and one bond issue. One issue is 10 years long, and the other one is longer than 10 years. There's a second component. You'll see that is tax exempt or taxable. And in our world, again, what that means, if it's tax exempt, is a public purpose projects, meaning it's financing projects that everybody benefits from. Roads, water, sewer, those type of projects. And they can be issued on a tax exempt basis, which means the purchaser of the bonds the interest on that is exempt from federal tax. And there's a tax benefit which drives down the tax rate. When it's taxable, and you'll see the second issue is taxable, it's taxable because there's a private activity involved. In this case, the mall is part of that second issue, as is some work being done in tax increment districts number 11 and 12. That's why they're segregated out and they're separate. In addition to that, working with city staff, there are certain things that we need to manage. One is borrowing capacity. It's been an issue in the city in the past. We want to manage borrowing capacity to make sure that the city also has adequate capacity to take on future projects. You're at about 45% right now, and that's going to drop a little bit going forward. So you hit a threshold at one point, a little over 50%. That's backing off now. And so that's one item that we do talk a great deal about with the city staff. The second is the amount of the levy. At the end of the day, this all has to get paid back. And either it's being paid back from the levy, and that's the general obligation note issue, is all levy supported, or part of it is tax increment district number 6. or it's being paid back from another source. It could be water revenue, sewer revenue, tax increment revenue, different sources that pay back the funds. So back to the $5,655,000 issue. What we're looking to do is finance really two different pieces here. One is the city's 2021 capital projects, which is $3,692,000. That's your capital projects from the capital project budget that was approved by the city council. In addition to that, we're looking to refund the state trust fund loan that was taken out in 2020 for tax increment district number 6. The idea there was to take that state trust fund loan out on a short-term basis and refinance it at lower rates if rates are lower like they are today. So the combination of those two items, your capital list and the TID 6 projects, are all part of the $5.655 million. So procedurally, if you give us approval tonight, your resolution, a couple of things occur. One, we work closely with staff to put together what's called an official statement. It's a disclosure for the market that says, you know, this is what we're selling. This is what the city of Wausau is selling. And it's like a prospectus on the city. That gets prepared. It gets sent out to different potential purchasers on a specific date. And that goes out to not just local banks, regional banks, national banks. It goes out to a significant number of potential bidders. During that time, we also have a rating call with Moody's Investor Service. We'll rely greatly on city staff on that rating call, but we'll look at a number of factors, Moody's does, including things like your fund balance, the amount of outstanding debt you have, the growth that you've seen in your community, the health of your tax increment districts, all those kind of projects. So that's the second item. Once all that's wrapped up, we will hold what's called a parameter sale, scheduled right now for June 23rd. And that parameter sale essentially states that if you meet established parameters, the sale will go through. Now, the parameters that have been laid out are in the resolution that you have. And we have parameters right now that are pretty flexible on purpose. We want to make sure that we have flexibility in how the general obligation note is sold. If you sold today, our expectation is that you would see rates that would be on this general obligation note somewhere around 1%, maybe a little bit higher. We're seeing a little bit of an increase in the market. So maybe between 1 and 1.25%. So that's the process we go through to approve the financing. There's a rating call. Again, a lot of information coming from the city to put together that disclosure document as well. So tonight, what we're looking for is adoption of the resolution, which is a parameters resolution that gives us permission to proceed with all those steps that I just went through, so that you have funds in place by mid-July to, one, pay off the state trust fund loan for TID 6, and two, for all your capital projects that you're taking on throughout this year. So that's the first issue.
Okay, thank you. I guess at this point, before we start discussing, I would entertain a motion. I got a motion by Rasmussen and a second by Herbst. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I have just a couple. I think that I want to emphasize that the flexibility that we're afforded with the parameter sale really will help us out, because it ensures that we hit the market at the right time to get the most competitive rates. And so that then doesn't require that the debt sale take place on council meeting day, where Phil would make the sale and then race up here to present to us the same night. So allowing that flexibility, so if they're aware based on market trends that a number of municipalities are going to the market at the same time, when that really thins out your pool for folks that may be interested in buying in. So I think us approving this as a parameter sale not only will save us a bunch on that state trust fund loan, but it also will allow us to get the best possible rate. So hopefully we'll all support that.
Thank you. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I had asked this at Finance and in the past meeting, but that for the the $1 million fire truck, is that something that under the Biden administration, is that allowable costs so that we could end up reducing that bond by $1 million or not?
Well, I think there's going to be, if it's okay, I'll try my best to answer the
I
question.
see the finance director jumping, and I see our finance chair
I'll let
jumping
Mary
too,
Ann
so.
jump in also, but
There
I'm
might
just
be a
going to
couple.
give you a real quick update. I know the mayor probably was part of the call as well with the League of Municipalities today. I sit in on all the webinars regarding the American Recovery Act funds, and they're going to be pretty limited in scope. I think there are going to be, water, sewer, storm, and broadband projects and stormwater projects that are kind of defined projects that will be eligible, along with other opportunities where there's been some hardship regarding what occurred with the pandemic. But the guidance isn't fully out there yet. I mean, it kind of leaks out over time. My read and everything I'm hearing so far is at least the American Recovery Act funds will not be for things like streets and or equipment at this time. Now, things can change, but at this point, that's where they're at. There's a second wave of potential funds that are out there, some type of infrastructure funding that may come forward, but I think anybody who pays attention to this, there's nothing out there at the moment to chew on. I know there's proposals. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of debate, Congress, in regards to that. So I don't think there's been any guidance on what kind of money will come from that. There certainly could be components of that could be equipment, et cetera, but there's no guidance on that at this point. But under the American Recovery Act funding, from everything we're seeing, fire apparatus or any other type of equipment will not probably be eligible.
I have another question. If that does happen in the future, could these dollars be callable early?
Yeah, well, every issue that we work on will have a call feature. The 10-year note, which is the 2021A issue, which includes the money for the fire truck, has a 7-year call. So it wouldn't be an early call. It'd be, you have to wait 7 years. It's notes, though, and I think that's what's really important. The fact that you're issuing general obligation notes means that you have that money available for any public purpose project. It doesn't have to be defined for fire apparatus. It could be diverted, if need be, to a different road project that the city would have in 2022. So there is flexibility that you're issuing notes, that you have the ability to use those funds for other purposes in case there is further guidance and monies could be used for things like fire trucks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think we're ready to vote on this item. Reminder, it's the $5.7 million in general obligation promissory note series 2021A.
Please vote. Motion passes 9-1.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is file number 210520. It's an initial resolution from the Finance Committee authorizing $1,630,000 in general obligation bonds for community development projects in tax incremental district number 12. Want to hit us up first?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.
I'll try to keep it's the same timing, same process. I talked a little bit about the taxable issue. There's really two resolutions tied to the taxable. The first is the $1.6 million, which is really for the mall project. There's a private activity component to that, meaning there's potential benefit to a private developer or entity, which is why it's taxable. So the B issue, the 2021B, the $9,795,000 issue, has two components. One is the $1.6 million for the mall project, which is TID number 12. And then the second is for the refinancing of what's called a taxable NAN note anticipation note that was taken out in 2018. So back in 2018, there was the Wausau chemical project and such that were kind of out there. The goal was to move them into tax increment districts 11 and 12, see what value was created in TIDs 11 and 12, refinance that debt long-term, which is what we're looking to do now, to better match up the revenues of TID 11 and 12 with the debt service, now that we have a known revenue in the tax increment district. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here. We're kind of doing both purposes at one time. In the pre-sale report, you see we have different paybacks for TID number for these projects. The TID 12 project, the mall project, there's a very quick 5-year payback. For TID 11 and TID 12, for the other projects, they're out over a longer time period. Again, matching the revenues of the tax increment district with the debt service so that we don't have to tap into the levy to be able to support the tax increment district. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with the 2 resolutions for the 2021B issue.
Okay, thank you. I guess before we discuss, I would entertain a motion. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Watson. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all the great information. In terms of the mall, how much money specifically toward the mall out of these monies?
The 1.6 million is for the mall, and then the remaining amount is the refinancing of that short-term issue for TIDs 11 and 12.
So the vast majority of it on this item would be the mall, is that correct?
No, just 1.6 is mall. The remaining is all for the refunding out of the full 9,795,000. So of that, the majority is refinancing existing debt.
Yes, so just to be clear, the item that we're talking about now is specifically that 1.6 million.
Yes.
So
That's all mall.
Yeah, that was my
I'm sorry,
question,
yes.
sir.
That piece is all related to the mall. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And as District 3 had signaled during the budget process, don't think that's appropriate use of public funds. Thank you.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Important to recognize on both of these items. First, this particular bond that's pertaining to the WAS project. This is to honor a commitment that this body has previously made. And that said, the return on that investment is miles beyond what this core investment will be in terms of partnership with them. So hopefully we'll support that. Secondly, with the note anticipation note, we had talked about this at length in finance when the note anticipation note was taken out. And while it is a less reliable and less stable financing vehicle, when there's a ton of uncertainty about what will develop in a tax increment district because it's brand new, that's the tool that we used. But at the end of the day, now that there's revenue coming in from the stuff that got built in that tax increment district, now we want to use those tax dollars to pay for the debt, not everyone's tax dollars out of the levy. So this actually financially is a good move for us, and it really turns that debt over into a stable financial instrument and not one that has a lot of volatility. So that also helps us in terms of our financial rating to use that instrument less, the note anticipation mechanism. So the approval of that item is actually a service to our residents.
Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just had a question. It was just stated that our ROI would be much more than the monies we're discussing. What precisely is that ROI, and what was the ROI calculation on that, do you recall?
Well, if you'll recall, during the conversation of whether or not we were wanting to partner with WAS in the plan that was presented for a whole-scale renovation and the insertion of new infrastructure into that area, the estimated taxable value on the developments that will result there once those sites are cleared and available to be marketed, the taxable revenue that we will gain on all of those buildings is way more than $1 million. So when I talk about return on investment, I'm talking about the percentage of involvement that we have in a public-private partnership. And while we don't ever want to be involved in a public partnership, in excess of roughly 10% is our general guideline in the ED committee. At the end of the day, our financing mechanism for the WAS plan is a mere fraction of what its total cost and its total revenue generation will be. And we had that discussion at length in economic development when we approved the project in the first place. So this is the finance tool for it, but we made that commitment prior, and we need to make good on that commitment.
Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the reason I asked about ROI is because as a long-term marketer, I'm very familiar with it. And when Mr. Gadorzi had come to speak at Riverside Park not long ago about this project, at the time, and perhaps this has just changed profoundly, but he had said there wasn't really any specific private sector dollars committed at that point to specific developments, and perhaps that had changed. So yes, in terms of some theoretical calculation, thank you for that explanation, but it's still a lot of money with really little to back it up right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Alder Rasmussen.
Yes, just a quick counterpoint in the fact that we are also getting back an awful lot of land to restore infrastructure in that same area. So at the end of the day, the extension of 2nd Street, the reintroduction of Jackson Street, the extension of 3rd Street, and the extension of 4th Street in and around the area currently occupied by the mall, the value of that land alone is a tremendous gain for us, for our ability to be able to, from a circulation standpoint, be able to promote the downtown where vehicular and pedestrian traffic can circulate in areas where it has not been able to for nearly 40 years. That's a gain for us as well. So we need to make good on our prior promise.
All right, thank you. I don't see any further discussion.
Please vote. Motion passes 7-3.
Thank you. All right, we are moving on to file number 210521. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $795,000 in taxable general obligation corporate purpose bond series.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this just brings together the refinancing that I talked about earlier for TIDS 11 and 12 that Alderman Rasmussen talked about, making sure that we have the anticipated needed revenue coming from those tax increment districts to pay the debt service, along with the $1.6 million that was needed for the mall project. So this is the combination of the two and giving us, again, authorization to proceed with the sale of those two items.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I would entertain a motion before we discuss. Motion by Neal, second by Herbst. Any discussion? Alder McElhaney.
I just wondered, what is I just want you to explain the difference between what this does interest-wise, or what we expect compared to what we had for our residents.
Yeah,
Thank you.
when we took out that short-term, the taxable note anticipation note back in 2018, the rate was 3.45% for 5 years. We're looking to finance this now over a 15-year period. We're expecting a rate around 2.5% on a taxable basis, maybe in that ballpark. So even though we're stretching the debt out over a longer period, again, to match up the revenues and the expenses, we expect it to be at a much lower rate.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone requesting to speak, so I think we're ready to vote on this.
Please vote. Motion passes 7-3.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Alder Larson.
I need to recluse myself because of my relationship with, in the past with Mr. Rocky on this next agenda item. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Thank you very much. All right, we are moving on to file number 210108. It's a resolution from the Public Health and Safety Committee considering the report, including the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation with regards to the Class B beer and liquor license of Timothy Nawrocki, doing business as Rock's Place for the premises located at 810 South 3rd Avenue, with 15-minute oral arguments to be heard by the complainant and licensee. I'm going to hand it over to our Attorney Miller, maybe to guide me.
All right, we will have, we'll hear the oral arguments first, and we'll have the city or not the city, the complainant's city attorney, Tara Alfonso, begin.
Good evening. I am Tara Alfonso. I'm one of the attorneys in the city attorney's office. Excuse me. And I have a frog from my mask. I'm here tonight representing Captain Todd Baton from the City of Wausau Police Department, who's filed a complaint that Rock's Place, one of the taverns in our city, has, number one, become a riotous and disorderly house, and number two, in connection with that activity, has had 150 demerit points assessed against it under city ordinance. State law permits this council to revoke or suspend a liquor license under conditions where a person keeps or maintains a disorderly or riotous house or has violated a municipal regulation adopted under Wisconsin alcohol laws. The city ordinance charges your Public Health and Safety Committee to call before it all licensees who have accumulated 100 points in a 12-month period for purposes of a revocation or suspension hearing. Proof of either or both of these things would be sufficient to merit a revocation or a suspension of the liquor license held by Timothy Naraki, the owner of Rock's Place. Your Public Health and Safety Committee did hold a hearing on this complaint on May 17th, just Monday of last week. It heard all of the evidence and agrees that the city has proven the allegations in Captain Baton's complaint. After carefully hearing the evidence, watching portions of videos from Rock's Place's surveillance cameras, and watching a portion of a police officer body cam, listening to the testimony of Captain Todd Baton and Police Officer Mason Hagenbusher and Officer Aaron Carlin, and hearing from Police Chief Ben Bliven, and hearing the testimony of Timothy Naraki, the licensee himself, and his general manager, Jacqueline Storer, it voted to recommend to you, the full council, revocation of this liquor license. The committee has presented to you a report that contains and references its findings, conclusions, the recommendation, and the exhibits from the hearing. The time Attorney Swakis and I have to speak to you tonight is limited. Timothy Naraki and Attorney Swakis have filed objections to the report and the revocation recommendation. I've filed a statement in support of that report on behalf of Captain Baton. I hope you've taken the time to read that report, because in the statement submitted in support of the Public Health and Safety report, I've addressed a number of issues raised in the objections filed by Timothy Naraki and his attorney. And so I hope to use my time tonight to talk about a couple of other things. As I said, the law is such that if a house, meaning a bar or a tavern, is disorderly, riotous, indecent, or improper, then that license may be revoked. Please know tonight, there's no exception under these statutes that permit riotous or disorderly conduct if the person in charge just can't help it or just can't stop it. Nor does it matter how the house got that way. It is enough simply that it is that way. Balancing the interests of the public safety and a tavern owner, the responsibility for the house and the activity there, both inside and outside, is on the owner, period. Your review of the report presented to you, especially the synopsis of the events that's contained in that report, shows the evidence in this case is beyond question that the owner of this bar is unable to maintain this house and it has become a disorderly and riotous establishment. The synopsis of events that's contained in the report, which is evidence in this case and was testified to by Captain Todd Baton, shows between January 1, 2019 and March 4, 2021, 15 fights in the bar or the parking lot, 5 complaints reported to involve weapons or the threat of weapons, 1 noise complaint, 1 medical emergency with a woman in the bar vomiting and falling in and out of consciousness, 1 event of liquor outside the interior of the bar premises, and a failure to cooperate with the police department during a serious firearm investigation. The focus of a significant portion of the Monday hearing were the March 4 and February 21, 2021 fight complaints, which involved the display or brandishing of firearms, and a July 12, 2020 report in which an individual fired his weapon while heading to a vehicle parked in front of the tavern after a disagreement, all of which was captured on the tavern's video surveillance and where a bullet casing was located outside of the bar as further evidence. Also of serious concern is the evidence presented of a lack of cooperation by Rock's Place during Officer Carlin and Officer Paff's investigation of the February 21, 2021 weapons incident. The officers were not initially provided complete video surveillance from the bar. Officers were given only video by Rock's Place General Manager for the period of 10 p.m. to 11:59 p.m., and then video from 1:37 a.m. to 2 a.m. There was a 1.5-hour gap in that video. The incident being investigated by police was contained in that missing video. Rock's Place would argue to you that this is a misunderstanding or a confusion or some type of accidental error. Is it merely a coincidence that the event depicted on their video begins and occurs during the time frame of the original missing video? The Public Health and Safety Committee did not think so. The complaints and activity in the report that you have in front of you are not from a 10-year or a 5-year or a 3-year period. They are things that have happened in the last 28 months, a little over 2 years. Rock's Place would have you think that it is somehow unfair or unlawful that this time period is 24 months and that it is too long, that somehow you should only consider evidence of disorderly or riotous events within the annual license period, which is July 1st to June 30th. That is not the law, however. And what the evidence shows over this period is that at Rock's Place, there's an increasing pattern of violence and threatening and disruptive behavior. Mr. Naraki may ask you to have consideration for the fact that he is not able to control what bar patrons do, especially outside of the interior of the bar premises, but that doesn't mean that the city must continue to keep this house open that cannot provide for the safety of its very own patrons, neighbors, and passersby. And what about the question of ability to control? Other taverns and bars in this city do it every day. And the dangerous pattern at this bar, as Captain Baton has testified at the hearing, is greater than that at other nearby taverns. Other taverns and bars in the very same neighborhood do it. Look at Christine's, which is just down the street from Rock's Place, or look at M&R Station, which is right next door. The tavern comparison in the report before you shows that in a 28-month period, Rock's Place had 22 fight calls and 3 calls for threats with weapons. M&R Station had 7 and 1 respectively. Christine's had 3 and 0. While these numbers might shake out a little differently by the time they were compiled into the synopsis that is in your report, as Captain Baton testified at the hearing, once officers respond, they may find a weapon involved which wasn't reported in the original call, or they may find a fight to be unsubstantiated. Your Public Health and Safety Committee was convinced, however, to a reasonable certainty that there had been a total of 23 calls for service by police to Rock's Place since January 1st, 2019. Apparently, control can be provided and is being managed at other bars for the protection of bar patrons, neighbors, and passersby. The community, neighbors, passersby, and these residents surrounding Rock's Place should not have to shoulder the burden and suffer the dangerous activities inside and that erupt and spill out from this tavern. The city doesn't think it's mere speculation that the riotous and disorderly conduct at Rock's Place may be approaching the point where somebody is going to be seriously injured or even killed. The mix of alcohol with firearms, with guns, is not a combination to be taken lightly. And it cannot be ignored that Rock's Place, both Mr. Naraki and his general manager at the hearing admitted that there have been firearms problems and fights at the tavern. They don't deny it because it cannot be denied. I don't know exactly what Rock's Place will want to tell you tonight, but from the hearing it will likely be excuses or rationalizations or future plans to be implemented. However, changes previously implemented at the bar, as testified to at the hearing by Rock's Place, such as improved lighting, expanded interior bar place, have not changed the dangerous behavior and activity at the bar, within the parking lot, and adjacent streets and sidewalks. The complainant urges you to find that this is enough. This council, gave Mr. Naraki a Class B beer and liquor license, and that license carries with it responsibilities. Responsibilities for the actions of employees at the bar, and responsibilities that protect the patrons of the bar and the public health and safety and order of this committee. When considering the report of your Public Health and Safety Committee tonight, the law requires of you and asks that you not act in an arbitrary or oppressive manner, and that the evidence of the record substantiate the decision that you make. The complainant and I must demonstrate through the hearing and report that this house is disorderly or riotous, and/or a municipal regulation adopted by the city has been violated. The level of evidence that is required to prove this under the law, it's a preponderance of the evidence, or evidence that satisfies you by the greater weight of the credible evidence to a reasonable certainty that your answer to the question, is this a riotous and disorderly house, should be yes, and the accrual of the demerit points, which are the result of certain events at the tavern, violate the city's ordinance. This is not a case where you have to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not a criminal case. The city requests your adoption of the recommendation and the report of your Public Health and Safety Committee that you revoke the license that was granted to Timothy Naraki doing business as Rock's Place. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Attorney Daniel Sfakis.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Attorney Dan Swakis, and I represent Rock's Place, which is owned by Timothy Naraki. I'm not going to stand up here and give you excuses. What I'm going to do is go over some of the facts that were testified. The city attorney just indicated that there were 23, or that there were 23 instances in the last 2.5 years there. What she didn't tell you is that the patrol captain testified that that number came from 911 calls. Okay? Now, it's not calls to 911. It's calls from dispatch. Okay? There's a difference there. So I'm not calling in 911, it's dispatch. So Mr. Rocky calls in to have an officer walk in his premises. If they pull up to the premises and say, I'm out at Rocks, that call goes 911 dispatch, and that's recorded. So not all of the incidents there that is testified to were that. Now, that officer admitted that that's what happens. That's just a setup of why they responded. It could be for nothing more than interviewing a witness, and they respond. It could be any kind of response. That's what he looked at, and that's the number. So don't just think that's a number of how many fights there were, because it's not, and that's not the evidence presented at that hearing. Now, and I want you to understand it because I think that's important. Now, you've all received a copy of the report and findings of facts by the committee, and I respect the committee's understanding of what it is and what they found. I have to indicate that you hopefully saw my brief or read it in regards to what should have occurred in regards to whether or not revocation was an issue, or whether suspension was an issue, or not at all. And if you read my response, I hope that you read Tara Alfonso's response to mine in regards to it. Because in that, she cited some case law that says, hold it, you can consider all of these instances. And I believe she cited case Hedgewood versus City of Eau Claire. I know no one's taken the time to read it. I did. It doesn't indicate anything about how long a time period a city can use to determine it. The whole point of Hedgewood versus City of Clare was whether or not the statute in regards to riotous or disorderly conduct place and how to proceedings, or whether it was constitutional. That's what the whole issue was about. I read it. If you want to go into some facts, this was, it's a funny name for a bar, and I want to remember what it was, and I'm thinking, oh, the Nasty Habit Saloon in Eau Claire. Gotta love someone picks that. It's a college bar that happens, and what happens was in 2005 and 2006, there are a number of instances that occurred at this bar. By the way, those instances were with patron and staff, each one of those. That in November of 2005, an incident occurs, and the city council gives an ultimatum saying, we're going to suspend your license voluntarily, or we're going to move to revoke. The gentleman decided that he wanted to have a hearing on revocation. Now, in regards to that, 3 other instances occur right after that, which are included in revocation. The court even indicates that it focuses on all the main cases that they're looking at where cases occurred that year. I mean, you can't not just look at a time slot and say this is it. You got to take it in perspective. But to move for revocation, you have to take that time slot. Okay? That's what the court did in Hedgewood. They didn't even discuss what time period is appropriate. I'm not here to give you excuses. If you look at the time period in this instance, almost all of the findings from the council were from a period before June of 2020. The city did not move at that time, and that committee did not move at that time to not renew the license. They did hold a hearing in June and indicated what's going to change. They talked to them about what's going to change. They agreed. They issued the license. So then we look at what should be looking at for appropriateness of revocation or suspension. The 2 main instances that we just talked about, and I think, Tara, I think you mentioned something about a July instance about a firearm. I think that was this March. I think there was one in February and one in March. I'm going to deal with that because I think those are the 2 things that the council found in regards to a violation since the last issuance of a license. What happened? At some point in February, the officers go to the bar. I think it was February 20th. This is the day after the incident. And they're requesting tapes and to talk to it. The officer, and it's Carlin, I believe, testified that he went to the bar and asked to speak to the bartender who was on duty the night before. He said, you know why I'm here? She said, no. Well, it's about the incident the night before. And she said, what incident? Okay, if the person responsible at the bar doesn't even know it occurs, that's an issue, because the police department issued 50 points for non-reporting. I'm not sure how you can be charged for non-reporting when you don't know it occurs. But the council found that that was a violation. Now, Officer Carl indicates that at the time he went there, he said, I want to see the videotape. And the only person who has access to the videotape is my client's general manager. And the officer even indicated that when he came in and he started his investigation, he only asked for time from 10 to midnight. And that during the investigation, they found other items might be available and asked for more. That's what he testified to. General manager came up and testified that she was called in and provided the time period. And yes, it was a time period from 10 to midnight. And I can assume that was the first request, and they added on the rest, and somehow a part of it didn't get it. She also testified that she went home. It's a 12-minute drive, that before she got home and in bed, they called and said, hey, we're missing part of it. That she drove immediately back and gave them to it. So how is that failing to cooperate with police? Within a half an hour, they got all the videotape. And by the way, no one even knew what happened. It was an anonymous complaint, apparently, because the bartender didn't even know it occurred. And does it appear that a gentleman walked out and flashed a weapon? It may appear, if you watch the videos or you looked at the pictures. I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked shiny. But no one's found a weapon. He didn't flash it around, wave it around. It looked like he pulled it out of his pocket and had it down by his side. I don't know what it was. But even then, our person in charge of the premises did not even know it. You can't report something you don't know if someone brings that in. The only other incident the committee looked at was one from March. That was an incident in regards to a fight or argument that occurred. They were asked to take it outside and leave the bar. They did. They took it outside, and in this case, by the way, the last one was from January. It was 100 points. It was assessed for, one was you didn't report it, even though you didn't know about it, you didn't report it. And two, it was not about the non-turning over evidence, because they did. It was about a weapon being involved. The second time around is in March that the city found a violation. In this case, there was a shoving match outside. That within a short period of time, the gentleman involved leaves the premises, leaves the parking lot. It cannot be my client's responsibility once he leaves. Now, the video indicates that he walks back towards the bar, doesn't step on the bar property, brandishes a gun, argues, and turns around, walks in the middle of the street and fires it. Doesn't come back on the property. My client has no control over that. Even then, the only thing that occurred, or the violation was, and I believe it was failure to report, yet the officer testified. At that hearing, he testified, well, it was a bartender or employee that called the police. Holy, so they called the police, but that's still a violation. Well, and I didn't know this, but my client talked to me about it, and the chief, Livin, indicated that, yeah, we have a policy that if you call the police, we're not going to issue any points. In this case, the employee called the police. I'm not sure how they were issued any points. Chief Livin said, well, it must have been other items involved in it. The city just mentioned a minute ago, if you look at the two other bars, you saw Christina's, right, with no incidents? Why is that? There's no testimony because no one knew how long they were closed. If you're closed, you aren't going to have any instances. And that's why there's nothing on that sheet. And I think the city even indicated, yeah, but we don't know how long they're closed, but that's just what we picked. Then you look at M&R. M&R's policy is not to call the police and they have less fights. Well, that's why, because they're not reported. Well, how do you justify saying, I want you to be proactive, to contact us if something occurs so that we can head it off, yet say we're going to issue you points, or we're going to say, oh, we're going to use that against you because look how many you have. Yet the chief indicated that, yes, he's taken steps to do things. And my client testified they put in brand-new, I think it's 8 brand-new video cameras, brand-new wiring, that they remodeled the whole interior of the bar, that they put floodlights out. There was testimony that there are signs up saying no weapons, that any violation of, or any argument, the police will be called, posted right on the door, and that was presented. My client even testified that, look, we had in the past used security companies, but because they're being sold, we haven't had one recently, that they've used some other people, that private people who were prior military to come in and bounce, but yet he wanted to do was hire a security back on, and he was looking at Wesco. Tonight, we're asking you not to revoke the liquor license in this case. In regards to this, there was no prior punitive action taken. All the stuff was from 2020 before the liquor license, or before, if you can look at it, except for those 2 instances that the committee cited. We're asking that if you found it appropriate, to dismiss it. If not, that you suspend his license. By the way, in the Hedgewood City, he was even offered a 3-week suspension, and he didn't take it. My client was never even offered that, or did it come onto the table. We're asking that at this point, you look at the facts of what was presented. I'm not offering excuses. I'm looking at what was presented to the committee and its findings. In the one instance, I think the committee report indicated that the defense didn't show enough to say, hey, you didn't show enough of why this might have been a mistake of presenting that video. Well, first of all, the video was nothing in regards to a violation, so I didn't have to go say why it was. But secondly, it was provided within a half an hour, and so it's not a violation of being totally cooperative, because as soon as the officer reviewed it, saw the missing part, he called, it was provided. We're asking that you dismiss the revocation in this matter and not go with the committee's findings. And I understand, I respect the committee and the members of that committee, but I look at the issues that were arisen in that and what you should look at in deciding that at most you should find is a suspension of his license. And thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I think at this, is it?
Tara, did you want to have a rebuttal, or?
Well, I used almost 50 minutes.
You did? Okay. You did have like 1 minute. Okay.
Is the committee put on the record that they have received and read the report?
Yes, I was going to do that before the voting.
Okay, so it looks like the next item on our agenda is what we're going to, so I would request an Alder make a motion and read the language. Yes, Alder Rasmussen.
First, I guess, just as a procedural point, we have to decide as a body if we wish to discuss this matter in closed session.
Sure.
Or if we wish to discuss it in open session. It's not required that we discuss it in closed session. I have some comments to make on behalf of the committee, but I'm fine to make them in front of both attorneys.
Okay. Is there a will of this body? I'm not seeing anyone one way or another, so I guess I would entertain a motion.
I was just going to say, I agree in having it in open session.
Okay, so I guess the motion, I would need a motion then in order to continue the conversation.
So then we have to take a motion to proceed with the revocation.
Yep.
Okay.
Are you making that motion?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion to proceed with the revocation. Do I have a second? Second by Herbst. All right, we are ready to discuss. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. On behalf of the Public Health and Safety Committee, I have a few comments. First, let me tell you from experience, this is the 5th time since I've been elected to the Wausau Common Council that I've been through a revocation and suspension hearing. I'm confident that the committee employed the right process and that the committee considered the right evidence. That said, there's a few inconsistencies in what I heard tonight from our attorneys. The idea that the committee did not do anything to take action with Rock's Place prior to this point that we've reached is not true. In June of 2020, Rock's Place reached 100 demerit points. Mr. Naraki was summoned before the committee for a formal expression of concern The committee was clear with him that we were looking for improvement in what was happening at the premises, at which time he agreed to make his best effort to do better. By his own testimony in our 6-hour hearing last week, he admitted that despite his best effort to improve things in the bar, whether it be cameras and redesigning the inside and all of those things, that things hadn't improved much, and that things continued to be problematic there. And, that said, the vast majority of the defense's argument in the case is procedural in nature. I believe that we have followed a procedure that is in parity with Section 125, and that we conducted an impartial and fair hearing, and that we did that properly, and that we considered the right evidence. This body is under no obligation to offer a suspension first. Under the law, you can non-renew the license, you can suspend the license, or you can revoke the license. All three options are available. That said, I want to clarify a couple of things. You'll notice in the findings of fact that the committee published and read out at the end of the hearing, when you compare that to the total synopsis of events that were alleged to have occurred in the complaint at Rock's Place, we did not find 100% of those items compelling in our decision. Some of those things we actually agreed with the defense did not rise to the level of revocation. So, the woman that was fading in and out of consciousness and, throwing up and whatnot in the bar, some of those things, we actually did not include those in our findings as causes that we found compelling in making our decision. But we did find 10 other items, and those are listed in the findings of fact under item 7D. And those events include weapons, they include the gap in the video, they include complaints, or weapons complaints, fight complaints, outdoor alcohol, gunshots where bullet casings were found. We saw body cam video, and we saw establishment video. And in one particular piece of evidence that was admitted at the hearing, we saw a cab driver that was pinned in, trying to drop someone off, literally pinned in by these conflicting patrons, blocking the cab so that the cab driver was actually nearly caught in the crossfire of all of these things unfolding in front of the bar. Now, that said, Officer Carlin's testimony was a little bit mischaracterized. Those of us who heard it will recall that Officer Carlin and Officer Poff went back to the establishment to get that video, and Officer Poff talked with the general manager and obtained the video. Before they left the establishment, Carlin asked Poff, "Is this from 10 to 2?" And he said, "Yes, it's from 10 to 2. They went back to the station, and it was not. And so, ironically, the exact portion of the video that was missing depicted the entire event that we were investigating. Now, that said, I will also say that the Public Health and Safety Committee on a monthly basis gets a tavern report where we analyze and monitor the demerit points that are assigned to all license holders and the results of compliance checks. It is common knowledge in that committee that the police department encourages cooperation between the police department and tavern owners to make sure that establishments are safe and that they're running the places properly and that they're getting ahead of incidents before they become dangerous, and that they're not bouncing events that happen in the bar out into the parking lot and letting them then become either public emergencies or health emergencies or dangerous situations. There is a general guideline that when they encourage the bar staff to call the police, that when the bartender calls the police to help them with a situation, they typically don't assess demerit points. There is no written policy that says they can't, because if a situation erupts in a bar and the bartender perhaps didn't call as quickly as they should, so the incident is already out of hand, they can still assess demerit points. They don't always, but they have that ability. And the committee supports that, because as a situation is unfolding and as those officers are responding, they may find that more is going on there than they were aware of, which is the case with some of these weapons issues. Now, that said, we sat through 6 hours of testimony and evidence exhibits. And we believe that the city had proven its case sufficiently, and that they had proven that the events that take place inside the bar and then flow out into the street, across the sidewalk, and into the parking lot do present a danger to employees, to patrons, to neighbors, to passersby. So at what point does this situation ever get better? They've tried to put controls in place, and it's not improving. And at some point, we're going to get to a point with this situation where they're going to bounce something outside, and someone walking by, driving by, some neighbor, some other patron is going to get hurt, shot, killed, we don't know. But there is an awful lot of violent activity that's taking place inside this tavern, and that is what we were able to glean from the evidence. And what really scared us in terms of public health and safety is that that danger continues to be present. And so the longer you keep them open, if you suspend the license and that place reopens, if nothing improves, you're back here for another hearing and another suspension, another revocation. Well, how many chances do we give? And in the case of the 4 other establishments, that answer was none. We took those licenses away, and those businesses aren't in business anymore for a reason. And that said, I feel like we issue every year like 69 Class B beer and liquor licenses. It is really unfair to the ones that do it right every day and work hard to run a good place to keep one like this open with the same caliber of license, and all of this stuff is unfolding. So as a committee, we had some serious concerns about that, and we believed that the city had made its case sufficiently on these 10 very serious charges, not 100% of them. We believe that some of them were less consequential, and we did not include those in our findings. And even with that, we believe that we still had enough compelling evidence to convince the committee to recommend revocation, because the time has come. And, you know, this really is creating a very dangerous situation in a neighborhood, and we need to act. So, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question about the case of the missing video, because I've heard conflicting evidence brought forth by councils. Was the gap in question that was associated with an incident turned over or not? I've heard that it wasn't. I've heard that it was. So what is the definitive answer to that?
Ultimately, it was turned over, but after more than one visit. So they did receive it. That's how they discovered that the event they were investigating took place in the gap.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's what we heard at the hearing last week.
And the contention is that they were asked for video from 10 to midnight from one side, and the other side is asserting they asked for video from 10 to 2.
Carlin's testimony that his original ask was from 10 to midnight because there was a lack of clarity when the event actually took place, partly because the camera system at the establishment was off due to daylight savings time. And so once they figured out that they needed more time, on their second trip over, his testimony indicated that they had asked for 10 to 2. They thought they were leaving with 10 to 2, and that when they got back, they discovered that that was not what they had.
Was this a miscommunication or an effort to withhold, do you think?
Well, that's what, I can't speculate. That's what we, based on the evidence that we heard, we believe that it was a very odd coincidence and it would be a very convenient accident. So we found that compelling in our decision-making.
I'm tempted to kind of take that one off the list. If it was indeed turned over, it could be argued that it was a miscommunication or a mistake, but it was not tampered with or wasn't destroyed. It wasn't withheld for good. So, I mean, to me, that's sort of like a point that we don't really need to dwell on.
The issue in question wasn't even so much the video or what they perceived as a lack of cooperation. It was the event they were there to investigate in the first place, which was, again, the brandishment of weapons. And so the fact that, you know, folks are being told to leave and they're coming back with 8 friends and they're, you know, there's, you know, weapons brandishment more than once. That's, I mean, we have, you know, we want to make sure that taverns similarly situated are treated the same. We had one a couple years ago, you'll recall, where they were opening up the door and shooting at each other across the street with cars driving in between. That one's not in business anymore. So for us to allow this one to continue, I mean, we really need to be consistent in what we value in terms of evidence, and the evidence in this case was compelling, I mean, based on what we saw Monday night. So the purpose of the council making the decision is that we're the final body that makes the decision, but we are not required to relitigate all of the evidence and re-adjudicate the entire hearing. The Public Health and Safety receives that delegation and conducts that hearing for us, so that we can have that lengthy, in-depth, evidence-based discussion and then make a rational decision. We were in fact in closed session for 45 minutes to make sure that we were reviewing the evidence and all of the assertions and making sure that the assertions that we found compelling in our recommendation were adequately supported by evidence and testimony. So that's why we didn't just decide that 100% of the things in the synopsis mattered, because some didn't. But there was enough left after that vetting that there's enough there still that we felt that that establishment is really a danger to that neighborhood.
Alder Neal.
Thank you again, Mayor. I wonder if we might get Chief Bliven to come up to answer a question or two. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
I don't know how, council will go on this, in terms of suspension versus revocation. If it were to be talking about and recommending suspension, what is your feeling in terms of the proprietor's ability to take measures that would change the status quo that we've been seeing? Perhaps with the cooperation of WPD, implementation of whether it's metal detectors or something to ameliorate this, this recurring sort of thing happening over there. Do you feel that that's just wishful thinking, or is it something that is achievable?
I believe it's wishful thinking. We've been, I think Ms. Alfonso laid the case out pretty well, that, the facts that the Public Health and Safety Committee considered were from 2019 through current date. That's just the time frame that we brought facts forward. We've been working with Rock's Place and Mr. Naraki for many years on how to make sure that the establishment is safe for the patrons there. In June of 2020, as Ms. Rasmussen indicated, Mr. Naraki was here in front of Public Health and Safety Committee. That was after he and his bar manager had a meeting with me and Todd Baton at the police department, and we talked about how to partner with the police department. We talked about how to make sure that they keep their establishment safe. They did buy videos, they installed video systems, but they didn't stop the behavior from occurring, because video cameras don't stop behaviors, they just record behaviors. What stops behaviors is managers, bartenders that know how to de-escalate situations, that get out in front of situations and call law enforcement. None of those things are things that occur routinely at Rock's Place. So I don't think that they're capable of a turnaround if a suspension is issued. I think a revocation is appropriate.
Thank you. Because as I was walking in tonight, somebody encouraged me to be fair, and I think in all fairness, you've given us what we needed to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I guess I had some other questions too. I know that people are allowed to carry, but can't a bar or a place of business decide to not allow people to be carrying firearms in their business?
Well, I think as Mr. Swakis indicated, that there are signs that firearms aren't allowed inside Rock's Place, but signs, again, don't stop people from carrying firearms. We've had a number of incidents there where people are in large fights, they're in altercations, they go to a vehicle, they retrieve a firearm, and this happened on numerous occasions at Rock's Place. So whatever the establishment decides is their policy, it's the requirement of their staff to enforce that policy.
I understand, and is it available as an option, say, if you wanted to pursue this? Is there a type of wand or a type of, for the airlines, a walkway to alert you about metal being carried through? Say, if you put it at the front door and had a bouncer there, that would limit if you have anything unsafe bringing it in.
There was testimony at the hearing in regards to wanding. I believe they do have a period of time that Rock's Place did have a wand on certain nights where they were checking for, using it as a metal detector to try and check for firearms.
Okay. Compared to other, I guess, establishments, I happen to know an owner on North 3rd Street that tends to come into the bar later in the evening just to check in and probably stay till closing. So do you see a tendency of a lot of these altercations happening later in the evening, say at other bars or at Rock's Place, so that maybe they need to plan on having the owner or additional staff in place for later in the evening, say after 10 or 11 till closing, as a way to avoid some disturbances?
Well, I think there was testimony at the Public Health and Safety Committee about the timing of these events, about Mr. Naraki's presence on certain dates. So I don't want to re-testify to what Mr. Naraki testified to or what Captain Baton testified to. In regards to your question about what we see at most establishments is we don't have issues like this at most establishments. We do have, the Public Health and Safety Committee, like Ms. Rasmussen indicated, has the ability to call taverns in to speak about issues that are occurring at establishments. Sometimes they ask me to have meetings to talk about expectations, talk about how to cooperate with law enforcement and make sure that issues are remediated. And we do that with certain establishments, and usually we're met with, establishments that are willing to work with us and want to stop issues from occurring in their establishment. So that hasn't been the case here with Rock's Place.
Okay, I don't see anybody with any further questions.
So before we cast a vote, I first need to ask the council if you have reviewed the report, including the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Public Health and Safety Committee, and I will ask our clerk to take a vote just on that, if you have read it.
Do you want to roll call that, or what?
Yes, please.
Peckham,
Aye.
Killian,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Wadinsky,
Aye.
McElhaney, Rasmussen,
Aye.
Watson,
Yes.
Herbst, Ryan.
Aye.
All members present have.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are ready to move forward with the vote. Now, a reminder, you are voting on revoking the license of the beer and liquor license, Class B, of Timothy Naraki, doing business as Rock's Place, for the premises located at 810 South 3rd Avenue.
Please vote. Motion passes 8-1.
Right, thank you. I'm just going to take one moment. Whatever you need. You're good. Okay. Yes, do you need a break?
Could we entertain a bathroom break?
Yes, let's take 5 minutes. Thank you. right, everyone, we're gonna get back together. Do I need to pound my gavel? It's fun stuff. Cool. All right, we are back to continue on with our agenda. I'm gonna wait for the thumbs up from our guy back there. Got a thumbs up. All right, we are now moving on to item number 210514. It's a resolution from the Economic Development Committee approving Wausau's Affordable Housing Regional Task Force as a special committee. I guess I'll just give you a little background first on this. This is something that has come up at several meetings, and we took some time, and when I say we, I guess it's me, and some folks from the United Way, and some others who've been working on affordable housing to figure out what should we include as both goals to investigate for the Affordable Housing Task Force, who should be included, and so that's what you have here. There was a little bit of discussion at Economic Development, and I tried to take a nod to that, but I guess what is the pleasure of this body? I have a motion by Watson and a second by Neal. Alder Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make one thing clear. This did come through the ED committee, mainly, I guess, because that's where the discussion started and, developed over time. And that this does not in any way then make it some subsidiary of the ED committee. There's no oversight from ED on this. It simply came out of ED and will act then on its own accord with the administration. So we're not over it in any way.
Sure, thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I'm on the ED committee, and I had the opportunity to participate in that discussion. And one of the things I had brought up when you had presented on this was, gentrification and how that has impacted housing affordability in town. And since then, I've had the opportunity to speak with residents and others about this topic, and I'll say a couple things. One is those conversations have reinforced to me, especially in my district, with the history of my district on the southwest side especially, and the displacement that's occurred there, that this really, I believe, is an important component of what the task force may do, and in identifying certain strategies to mitigate the adverse impact of this. But in my discussions, I think I also gleaned that the term itself, and I think perhaps this has caused just some confusion in the dialogue we've had in the ED committee. The term itself, I think, is sometimes confusing and perhaps even up for debate at times. So I really wanted to clarify the working definition of gentrification as I was talking about it. And to do that, what I did is simply adopted the definition of what's been used in Wisconsin on similar affordable housing endeavors and studies in other municipalities. And in Madison, for example, in the Madison report, gentrification is defined as a market-driven racial and socioeconomic reconfiguration of urban communities that have suffered from a history of disinvestment. Displacement occurs when households are forced to move or are prevented from moving into a neighborhood due to conditions beyond their ability to control or prevent, such as rent increases. So in that vein, I think when we talk about maybe the working definition of gentrification, that's where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that improvements in neighborhoods can't be made without it being to the detriment of the community. But I think when that definition is clear that I laid out, I think we could probably agree at some point that that is not a positive. So I wanted to lay that out so that there was some clarification. And I think the term itself is not of critical importance. If we want to call gentrification a polka-dotted unicorn, I really don't care what the term is, but the definition I'm looking for is the one I just provided. So conceptually, that's what I'm referring to. And also, I just had an off-the-cuff discussion earlier today, late afternoon, and it's always enlightening to speak with different people. And, you know, I think that it was said to me that it's important that things are data-driven, and I certainly don't disagree with that. I think if something's citizen-driven and data-driven, it's very hard for the government to go wrong. So I'm also not averse to studying and laying out kind of quantitatively what may or may not be the impact. Now, if this was Texas Hold'em and I had a bunch of chips, I'd probably say I'm all in, because I'm pretty convinced that this is having an adverse impact based on the data that I've reviewed, and I've reviewed a lot of data. So in that vein, I would just, it may be an amendment, and I felt like this could be kind of a win-win, because it feels to me like colleagues are saying, well, we don't want to jump the gun, and we want to take the time to study and make sure that things are quantitatively supported. So, and I don't have to make the amendment just yet, but I was going to ask if, let's see, it would be number 14 on the resolution list there, and where it says analyze how displacement and gentrification susceptibility affects housing affordability. If we could maybe figure out a way to just add a statement at the end of that, that if we would determine that there'd be adverse impacts, to also identify then strategies to prevent or counter those adverse impacts. And so that's really all I'm looking for there, but it is a critical component to me, because I think my colleagues know and the public knows that really one of the main reasons I'm sitting here tonight on this body representing my district is because of some displacement and gentrification issues that have occurred in certain areas. And I think, you know, just what a concern that's been for my constituents. And I also feel that we started off the meeting positively tonight when we talked about the community for all. And it's hard, now that we know the working definition I was referring to, it's really hard to have that community for all if we are not looking at the data and making sure we're not displacing residents from their own neighborhoods due to things they can't control. So I really supported what we had talked about thoroughly earlier, but this is a time, I think, if we can figure out a way where the colleagues are comfortable with it, then I think we can really walk the talk and start attaching policy and resolutions to what we had discussed earlier. And I think this is a very timely way we could do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Watson.
I guess I have a couple different things. So along what Alder Keeling was mentioning, it looks like number 15 sort of addresses that, equitable neighborhood rejuvenation. It sounds sort of like that would be something that maybe could just get rolled into the previous one, or that's sort of a strategy that is sort of saying, hey, we want to see the data, but then obviously we want action, right? But then also, I guess my other question was, how will the citizens sort of apply for positions on the board?
Okay, yes. So I guess the first thing I want to add is that 14 and 15 were added since the Economic Development Committee discussed this, based on the discussion I heard. I actually pulled those specific kind of goals and discussion points from a report that I read about gentrification, because I went in digging a little bit. So that's where that came from. You know, obviously, you own the policy document, so amend as you see fit. Now, when it comes to selecting people for this, we have a citizen participation form, and once approved, we will add in this Affordable Housing Task Force. And you can see that we outlined a couple of people that we think would be important, or at least on my initial thing we did about who should be members. And so thinking about people who maybe use affordable housing, assuming we can get participation there and it doesn't, you know, harm them and their livelihood. We have people from the United Way who are standing ready and willing to help us serve. We have people from NCAP who would be serving. There's a board, an executive director and assistant director. There are several people who have Actually, I talked to a couple of people today who called in to ask about this process, and they were talking about what they're doing in Merrill, what they're doing in other places. So I think there are places that there are people and places we can pull from, but ultimately, we will funnel them all through that participation form, and you will all vote on their appointments. So that is another kind of level of oversight for that.
All right, so I have 2 follow-up things.
Yes.
So one other thing, I think most of the council was invited to participate in the Housing Solutions Summit.
Yes.
So I would hope that after the task force is formed, that maybe those videos would be available to those participants. I think they were great, so.
So we partnered with the United Way on that. I
Yep.
think we can see like how many licenses we have left. I know that I RSVP'd for 1 million of those, and I haven't quite got through all of them yet, but.
So I just think it would be a valuable resource
Agreed,
for them to sort of
100%.
springboard into. And then I had one more question. What's the timeline for appointments to this?
I would like to move forward as quickly as possible, knowing that we only have one meeting a month. So if it's at all possible that we can get a bunch of people applying by that June meeting, I would be comfortable, like, just going crazy and getting the right appointments there. Otherwise, we could have it at the July meeting, but I think there's a lot of interest and people have been following this, so I think we can get enough people by that June meeting. So this is the call out to everybody. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I think that the task force is a step in the right direction. I like the fact that it will inventory what we have currently for housing stock and what our product actually looks like. I think that the analysis and the information that we can get from the task force will help us in our strategic planning effort that we're waiting to dive into, and that will also help us with some priority-based budgeting type things. I think it's important, though, for us to remember that absent home ownership, when it comes to rental housing is a business. And we are limited in how much we can manipulate and control the price point that something rents for. That's the landlord's decision. And so sometimes when housing isn't affordable, it's because that landlord needs that property to cash flow, whether it's a new building or an old building. And sometimes landlords raise rent, sometimes they make investments in their property so that the product they offer to the consumer is a better one. And that then, results in a commensurate rent increase. So, I think we have to be realistic in our expectations. And my hope to gain some insight from that industry is that hopefully someone who volunteers for the task force would be a landlord who provides low-income housing or reasonably priced rental units. And so I think that from their perspective, the economics of the struggles that they face also in providing housing, it should be part of the analysis as well. And so, hopefully, one thing we don't ever want to do is encourage property owners from investing in their properties or offering a better product in the marketplace. And so on many occasions, we have encouraged landlords and property owners to apply to community development for low-interest rehab loans and to make their property better. And that is not an effort aimed at displacing the tenants they currently have or forcing the rent point up, but there is a standard that regardless of what people who have little or nothing should not be forced to live in subpar housing. Everybody should be entitled to a decent, safe, and sanitary place to live. And if that means sometimes that a landlord has to be forced to make an investment to approve a property, whether it's through code enforcement or whatever, that process needs to take place because oftentimes low-income tenants don't have a voice. And the only reason Wausau adopted rent abatement was to give a voice to people who don't have one. And we worked for years in our original housing task force to find a way to hold landlords, predatory landlords who victimize tenants accountable. And that was a huge achievement for us. Only we in Madison have that, and we have that for a reason. The most dangerous housing code violations are eligible for rent abatement of up to 100%. And, we don't ever want to get away from the fact that just because someone has little or nothing, they should not have their voice suppressed, and they should not be forced to continue to live in a product that's subpar because we're afraid to make something look better. So I think that this group will be able to balance all of that, but I think we need insight from, we want a low-income housing consumer, but we also need a housing provider. So hopefully in those 3 other seats, whoever's watching tonight, that some landlord that's in this mix would volunteer to offer their experience would be super helpful to a group like this.
Thank you. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just would like to say that we have had housing coalitions and consortiums that I'm aware about since 2000. And I know Pam Anderson had been leading the coalition for the last 10 years, and she's retired now, but she's a banker that worked with US Bank and then also in Milwaukee. And that, in talking with her, she has a file of what other projects have taken place in the larger metro areas. And just recently, she was telling me how an older hospital in Milwaukee has been transformed into apartments with commercial businesses on the first floor. And that I've been made aware about some experts that are located in Madison that could talk more about low-income tax credits. And then being on the Preservation Historic Commission, there is historic tax credits out there, which according to Brad Lenz, 50% of our homes would qualify because they're 50 years old or older. I do think, in a way, you're reinventing the wheel when there's been a lot of other agencies and advocates that have been meeting regularly that include the Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, Neighbors Place, Women's Community. Tammy Strauss has been attending these meetings for decades, representing the city and those needs, as well as other agencies that are working with family. We're getting, it's amazing input that we're getting also from the Head Start program, because their staff are bilingual and they're going in people's homes to see what the home condition is, and then they can evaluate some of those areas as well. So I guess if you want to reevaluate and bring in a number of new people that know very little, if anything, about the history, I think you're talking about a 5-year plan, maybe to get up to speed. And I was at the Community Development Housing Authority meeting today and got delayed late in leaving and happened to talk to a couple of board members outside, and that they thought it was a good idea for the Housing Authority to look at the student housing at UW, Marathon County, and see if that is maybe accessible, something we could potentially look at in the next few weeks, and maybe go forward with that. So I do think you're trying to get a small committee when there's been a large community helping with people that are low income, to help them with utilities, to help them with commodities, so they have money to help pay for their rent or those kind of bills. So I just worry that it may end up giving a kind of distorted view of things, and I guess I'm really concerned about our low-income neighbors in the community. And from my time in Chicago, way back when, in the 80s, they built the basketball arena on the west side. Well, it was occupied by thousands of minorities, and so they were displaced. And once you put in the United Center, they got to move somewhere. But the other issue that was brought up just briefly today was that that Gorman is in the process of closing on buying the Landmark Apartments. They plan on closing on June 30th. And that it will be $20 million renovation, which will be part of, I believe, the national parks because of its historic value. But there's going to be potentially 100 units lost during this renovation, and then it will become Section 8. So they're planning some meetings with their tenants in the next few weeks, and that they don't know where they're going to go. And so there's some things that need to be thought of kind of immediately, or get some experts on tax credits to be looking at other options. As on the Historic Preservation Commission, I would like us to be looking at older buildings as something available in our area instead of having buildings torn down. There might be an advantage. So I just worry that people that have been in this field for 20 years or more and know a lot about the history and know that, you know, families where a single parent are going to tend up having a lot more difficulties finding full-time jobs and maybe living in poverty. And some of this, it just is going to take months and years to learn. And I just don't know if we really have the time for this learning curve. And that with Mayor Milkey, he started attending the United Way meetings to be involved and know more about the housing. But you've got great resources at Tammy Strauss, as well as the Housing Authority. They're already in place and focusing on affordable housing. So I just worry it could be a duplication. I understand you may want to get more people involved, but I guess I'm concerned if you limit it too small, you may get a lot of novices, and it may take years before you really understand the issues. Thank you.
I guess I just want to address the process for this. There's a reason you're talking about this now and not last December, when probably this committee started talking seriously about an affordable housing task force. I knew about the Housing and Homelessness Task Force. It was kind of a big group. I'm a part of it. And so I talked to the leaders over there, asking them, you know, is this something, this affordable housing discussion, is this something that can live with you at the United Way with this committee? And, you know, we talked a lot about it, and we came to the conclusion that what we needed for policymakers, at least as far as I'm understanding what this policy body needs, is not necessarily what they can offer. And I think the other thing is, you know, we have a different accountability when it comes to minutes and various suggestions. So that was something that I thought was important that we brought into this, was that we had minutes that were available to everybody, publicly noticed meetings, things like that. I think that's important for this. So yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time. We will all be judging the folks that we appoint to this on the merits and their background. And it will be really important for us to get it right. And we will have to understand that it does take time. But that doesn't stop you from making decisions in the short term either, making decisions on what kinds of development you want to happen as they become available. So I think that's something we need to do: short-term planning and long-term planning, and even longer-term planning. The next person I have is Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there going to be any time frame as to when this committee is, I mean, is there going to be any time frame, 6 months, year, and then are they going to report back to us?
I think that that's appropriate. You know, right now, as we're looking through the policing task force, it looks like it will take about a year for us to get to the recommendations, maybe a little more than that. But I think this body can give expectations saying, hey, I'd like quarterly updates on this, or whatever it is that you need to see, and they'll need to tell you what they need: resources, obviously, if there's research that needs to be done, or experts to hire.
And I also understand that we are a little light in the Economic and Development Department at this time. But say next week, should we hire an economic and developer, and a month from now, he comes down with a plan for, say, some affordable housing, is it going to be, is it going to be able to move forward? Or is this committee going to interfere with it? I also, you know, was at that same meeting that Alder Killian was at this afternoon, and we also talked about balance and how there hasn't been any in the city. It's all been catering to the upper 10%, you know, and I'd like to see the Economic Development Committee work on a little more balance, not committee, I should say Development Department, work on a little more balance in the future. And I also, tapping on what Alder Ryan was saying about the resources that are available here right now, I mean, we've also got WAS. We could tap their resources. We've also got the Wausau Chamber of Commerce. I'm getting emails every day, let's grow, let's grow, let's grow. Let's get them involved. You know, we've got the resources now. We know, I could say yes, the more the merrier, but in this case, I just think it's just a stalling tactic, and I hope this committee just doesn't turn into, pardon my pun, but a dog and pony show, you know, and just making it look like we're doing something when nothing's getting accomplished, when we could be doing things now. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate that you can do things now. As a member of this body and a member, and any of the Economic Development Committee, like, you drive policy here. So that you can do whatever you need to do now in order to pursue affordable housing. So I think that's important to recognize, that this is more a longer-term look. And it seems to be addressing a need that was expressed here in this chamber. Alder Peckham.
At last, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to just make a few comments. I like the fact that when you read this resolution, it makes you think this is a complex issue, and that's because it is a complex issue. And going at it with that knowledge is a hell of a lot better than saying, well, let's have a affordable housing task force and, just throw them in the deep end and see where it comes out. I think, this is well thought out and intelligent. I would like, and I don't know if it can be part of this, but I think something that would help with the affordable housing community would be if at some point the community, and I don't know if it would be the city or who would do it, but it would be nice if there was some sort of tenant advocate point or person or resource or whatever, when somebody's having landlord-tenant issues, someplace they could go and have an advocate work on their behalf. And I hope as this thing unfolds that we are open to wisdom and participation from other communities. I know that it seemed like when we got the first whiff of this, it sounded like you, Ms. Mayor, were thinking of trying to make it a little more regional, and then there was some pushback that everybody, all the members had to be from Wausau. But I don't know if there can be should be ways to bring people from neighboring communities and people who've been down this road in to help us see the best way to proceed on this. And I don't know if that's through regular guest speakers or something along those lines, but I think this body has in the past, and the community as a whole, has had the kind of the attitude in the past years, and I think we're getting away from it, but in past years we've had the attitude that Wausau knows everything there is to know, and we don't need to look anyplace else, and I think that's a farce. So I think we do look far and wide and get the best ideas in here and make something happen.
Sure. I think initially when I started talking about this and asking other places what they were doing, there was interest from Weston. They feel that they are experiencing a shortage of affordable housing. There was some comments from Marathon County that they were interested in what this looks like for the county. And, we looked at what Stevens Point was doing. They just had a really big report done on affordable housing specifically. So there are places that are doing things, and we can definitely draw on the expertise and wisdom of others. And of course, we have the American Rescue Plan funding, and affordable housing is actually part of that. So it's actually pretty good timing to have this discussion. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I think that this also will be a way to channel some of the energy that exists in the community around the subject. In the past, we have had kind of what I guess I'll describe as a scatter approach. I've been involved in this for a number of years as well, including the Homelessness Coalition. I was on the original Housing Coalition. And so, what we had was a coalition with a lot of really good agencies that provide services to people who need them, but not a lot of coordination between them. So people that needed services not only needed to traverse the entire city to get them, they may not even know they exist. And so even though that original coalition was a well-meaning group of people, they often were confined to solving issues like one person at a time. And sometimes their solution in, saving one person at a time was being outpaced by the number of people who were either about to become homeless or were. And so, not to be confused with the Homelessness Coalition, because there is some overlap here, I really think that part of the outcome of this is to figure out where we as local government fit as part of the solution. And our role in the solution is not to build and operate ourselves a monumental amount of low-income housing, because that's just not our role. But do we have things that are roadblocks to creating things like that? The one thing I will say, and Pam Anderson had said for years, is there are developers who want to come to your town and build these things. There probably are, but we have to be prepared that when they come, we need to be prepared to give and pay for incentives, because low-income housing does not cash flow without substantial subsidies. That's why they all need WIDA credits. Well, at the end of the day, sometimes WIDA credits are really hard to come by. That's a stringent process, and it takes years to get approved. It took Gorman 2 years to get the approval they needed for the landmark. And so when we work with that, we know that the solution is not necessarily fast. But, when we say in economic development, we don't want to partner with the private sector any more than 10% normally, throw that out. Because when you have a low-income housing developer that needs something to cash flow and needs to make a substantial investment, that 10% is a drop in the bucket. We will have to be a partner with them to the tune of more like 30+%. And, that's often why some of those projects don't take flight, because it requires so much taxpayer subsidy. And so if there's other ways to get there, we've been looking for them. And so none of this happens quickly, but I think it's important to get it done right. So, it may not be super fast, but I also think that we're not going to let the thing run for a really long time before we hear anything from them. So I would imagine that some of their analysis will come in stages. So as they complete a couple of objectives, you'll get results. You won't wait for them to complete all of their work and then just dispatch 15 items to us. So, if a low-income housing developer came along tomorrow to the ED committee and said he wanted to start building in 4 weeks, are we prepared to pony up that kind of money? And I think we have to be. Because if we want it and we're going to, tell people we want it, and there's no other way to make it happen, that's really where the rubber is going to meet the road for us. But I think this is a start, because right now there's a lot of interest in the community, and we're not the only city in this pickle. You'll recall that the affordable housing discussion is happening nationwide. It's a chronic condition in America. So I think we're taking a positive step here, and I think we should support it.
Yeah, I think one of the conversations I had near the end of the day, so I didn't get a chance to look into it very far, but it was a discussion about what they're doing in Merrill, and they talked about what affordable housing means, and the city is using some TIF funding to go towards building houses. So the city is giving them land, the developers. It's about 6 houses right now, and they're giving them $10,000 a home. And when I asked what the price point is for the home, they said, well, we determined that the affordable housing was $209,000 a home. So again, it's one of those discussions that's, and then they went into the over a 30-year mortgage at 2.75, all of the machinations of this. So I think that's something that we'll have to discuss and help understand. And if that doesn't seem affordable to us, the city will have to determine what does that mean then. Are we subsidizing more when it comes to developing? And I think that's a policy discussion that this body does need to have. So what the needs are and what we expect to contribute. I have Alder Killian next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to address some of the comments that have been put on the table. And I don't disagree that there will have to be government skin in the game and funds and so forth. And I feel like that's okay, because that is a central critical role of government. And even libertarians, are going to agree with that. When you look at things like protection of life, protection of property, if we do not have things in place that protect our citizens, and all of them, it's not a bad route to go. That's bad governance. So whatever it takes, really. And what we'll see is that there's a whole ecosystem and network tied into housing. So none of them are siloed. And what other cities in Wisconsin have found that when you start displacing residents away from the downtown area, which we're starting to do, and looks like there are more plans in place to do so, that doesn't just affect housing, because downtown's often a central transit hub for public transportation. So when you start that displacement from the central area, that then has an adverse impact on public transit, which then has employment-related consequences. So I think whatever it takes in the fiscal regard is fine, and it's good governance. And also, what Alder Ryan had said about urgency, I think there's a great degree of urgency to this. And when we look at some of the numbers with Riverview Towers and others, and there's a long waiting list already. We have statistics and data that says we have an urgent emergency, and that is why I had put on the table at the ED meeting that we should triage this so that we are handling critical situations immediately and taking a lean manufacturing or lean marketing approach where we don't spend a year or 2 years building a beast, and once it's brought to market, it's already outdated or is not ideal for the situation at hand. And in terms of landlords improving the housing situation and structures for tenants, I'm all for that, but I'm not talking about that type of displacement and gentrification. And I'll be more specific. What we're seeing, like with the River Edge Trail, for instance, when you take a look at the maps, what you will see in the downtown and near West Side area is that those are some of our most low-income neighborhoods. And just coincidentally, those are areas that are being targeted for market rate or high-end development. So that is not consistent with this type of principle. Now, we've seen that in the River Life area. It was tried along Thomas Street near the river, but that was stymied by community pushback that was both intense and sustained. And now we have the western side of the River Edge development with the talks of the MBX property acquisition along with nearby parcels by the city. And if you look at the map, which I've got in front of me, from the Wausau MPO long-range transportation plan, what you will see is that the neighborhoods just west of that planned River Edge Trail development are also very low income neighborhoods. So, as the police or marketers say in various situations, the best predictor of future behavior is often past behavior. Based on city past behavior, the city has taken part in predatory development schemes with low-income neighborhoods. So if we're going to start walking the walk, and my colleagues from District 10 and 11 brought this up, we cannot say one thing and do the other anymore. And for example, this is a pattern. We just paved the way for fees that may increase the cost of garbage to residents that have lower valued homes and less money, to the benefit of the rich or those with higher priced homes. Others would call that regressive taxation. That's completely inconsistent with a discussion like this. So I had hoped this would be sincere and effective, but in order to be so, we have to take accountability.
Point of order. We are talking about a housing task force, and we've been here a long time, Madam Chair. I guess I feel like we're going off the record a bit. I don't know. We're talking now, we are not agendized to be talking about the ordinance removal of last meeting. I guess, I understand tangentially what he's trying to say, but I would like to stay on the task force.
Okay, yes. Yes, so if you could please keep your comments germane to the task force and the needs of the task force, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Well, that would be my pleasure, Madam Chair. So I will, just in conclusion, I had hoped at the start of this conversation that we could approach this with some sincerity. And I'm sure all my colleagues are trying to do that, but I do believe that we have to look at it then holistically, as was discussed before, with housing and needs of our citizens. And, and I do believe this body and this administration is making an attempt here with affordable housing. But in my district, much of it, in certain streets were simply demolished and people displaced. So, I guess I believe this will pass, but given all that's been said, I guess I'll just make a symbolic gesture of rejecting what is sounding to me more and more like a symbolic gesture. Thank you.
Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention, you had mentioned about some type of advocate, and we've had Wisconsin Judicare, which I believe, Ann, you were affiliated them before you came here, which Will Harris is an attorney there that works with issues that for those that are low income in regards to foreclosures or being evicted as well. And I think as part of going and talking about the housing task force, that maybe UW Extension and their Rent Smart could end up being an education portion. I had worked with attorney Andrew Schmidt over the years, and he is offering both from a landlord point of view as well as a tenant of their responsibilities. I also am hoping, as part of what will happen with some of this funding from the federal, that we can really put a big chunk of money involved in home repairs, because I do think for a lot of the affordable homes in our area, putting money in that to make it energy efficient or upgrade the roof in that will probably be the best way to have affordable housing instead of building new housing. Thank you.
Alder Watson.
Okay, short and sweet. Of course, one of my things is to call the question, but I'm not going to do that quite yet. I just wanted to say I can't see any negative of having a discussion about affordable housing. It's something we need. It's something that should be data-driven. It's something we should support. We can do action as policy in our chambers. That's fine. But I think it's a no-brainer. So I really hope, once I call the question, everybody votes aye. Okay, calling the question, please.
Okay, is there any opposition to calling the question? I'm seeing none. I think we can vote whenever you're ready, Clerk.
Please vote. Motion passes 7-3.
Thank you very much. Moving on to file number 201109. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving modification of the 2021 budget, the Fire Department capital replacement. I would entertain a motion. Okay, we got a motion by Rasmussen, second by Watson. Any discussion? I'm not seeing anyone ready to discuss this, so we can.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you very much. We are now on file number 201109. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving modification of the 2021 budget for transit. I would entertain a motion. Got a motion by Herbst and a second by Peckham. Any discussion? I'm not seeing any. I guess everyone's hungry and tired. Or read their packet thoroughly.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you very much. We're now on file number 210518. It's a resolution from Parks and Recreation approving the Tandem Mobility LLC Master Services Agreement for operation of a bike share program. I would entertain a motion. Got a motion by Watson, second by Neal. Any discussion? Nope. Oh, Alder Ryan.
I had read about it in the packet, but are they actually going to have staff here in the city as part of their agreement to be checking the status of the stock and making repairs? Or is that going to be contracted out?
I see that Brad Lenz has appeared, but
Yes, that'll be contract. It's a contract with them as turnkey, so they'll handle maintenance, the operation of the software, everything that we need, and we have the bikes already.
okay. Alder Peckham looks like he would have answered, but he doesn't need to anymore. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Please vote. Motion passes 9-1.
Thank you. We're moving on to item number 210513. It's an ordinance from the Plan Commission on rezoning 510 South 32nd Avenue and 3205 Seymour Lane from institutional zoning to a single-family residential zoning district. You probably remember that as the former west side. We got a motion by Wadinski, a second by Herbst. Any discussion here? I think we're ready.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
Okay, thank you. We are now on to the portion where we need to suspend the rules. 6B filing and 12A referral of resolutions. This does require a 2/3 vote majority. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Watson, a second by Rasmussen.
Please vote. Motion passes 9-1.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to file number 210522. It's a resolution approving the amendments to the City County Information Technology Commission Intergovernmental Agreement and Operating Agreement. I would entertain a motion. A motion by Wadinski, and second by Herbst. Any discussion or clarification needed? All right, I'm not seeing any. I think we can vote.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
Alrighty, thank you. File number 210522, also a resolution approving citizen appointment to the City County Information Technology Commission Board. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Watson. Second by Wadinski. Any discussion? Okay.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you very much. We are now on file number 210517. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee authorizing the City of Wausau Mayor to accept the U.S. Treasury Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. I would entertain a motion by Watson, second by Larson. Everyone wants that money. Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm hoping when we do receive those funds that will be put in a specific account to have the funds there restricted as well as the interest relating to it. Thank you.
I see that Finance Director is on the WebEx, but I do believe we already do have a separate account set up, but maybe she can confirm if she hears us.
Yep. So we do have an account at the local government investment pool. We have accounts set up in the accounting records. And of course, with Ellers, we would be working with them on an investment strategy.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to file number 031007. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the 2021 Community Development Block Grant Program allocation, updated allocation. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Rasmussen, second by Neal. Any discussion here? Not seeing any.
Please vote. Alder Wadinski. Thank you.
You got called out, man.
Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. All right, we are now on to file number 121014. It's a resolution from the Public Health and Safety Committee amending section 8.08.170 licenses. I would entertain a motion by Wadinski, second by Herbst. Any discussion? Okay, I don't see anybody pushing their button.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. All right, now we're on to file number 201109. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee authorizing the modification of fees to the City of Wausau fees and licenses schedule adopted pursuant to the Wausau Municipal Code, 3.40.010A, and that's the pet license late fee. I would entertain a motion by Watson and a second by Wadinski. Any discussion? Yes, Alder Watson.
So, I know Alder Rasmussen usually does this, but I made the motion today at our meeting to lower that late fee back to $5 and then also reimburse the monies that people paid in, the overages for this calendar year, so 2021. And I think Mary Ann said it was about 14 grand that would be reimbursed.
We've got a couple comments here. Alder McElhaney.
I guess my comment is, I know when this came by, and I know how it came by, how much this was. Why wasn't this caught before that we were not allowed to? I mean, I've had complaints over the years, and I always thought it was really punitive, but is there, all of a sudden it said, well, we weren't allowed to be over $5. So I just wondered, I will be getting questions, and I wondered how that happened.
Probably, I don't know, a mistake by my office, or somebody recommended it at a committee 8 years ago, and it was adopted and maybe not looked up. I mean, we've heard that other committees have larger late fees. I personally did the research. I don't think it's legal the way you interpret the state statute to have it exceed $5, so that's my recommendation. It probably an oversight by my office that it got to that, because it was at $5 before that.
Okay, thank you.
That's an honest explanation. I don't know that anybody looked it up to see if we were allowed to raise it, but I don't think we are. You can raise the dog license tax, but you can't raise the late fee.
Okay, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. One of the discussions we had in finance tonight was that there's a distinct difference between three things: the dog license fee, the late fee, and the citation you get for failure to license. And so the late fee is the source of the legal angst that fee by statute should not be more than $5. In 2012 and 13, we had a subcommittee that was looking at all things animal ownership related. And one of the things to come out of that subcommittee was a recommendation that we increase the late fee and increase the license fee to gain compliance. And then we would then turn around and offer credits for things like spay, neuter, and microchip as an incentive for people to comply. And so I think at that point, there may have been some interchangeable use of terms and some confusion as to what you can statutorily increase. And so at that point, they all went up. The fines went up, the license fee went up, and the penalty went up. And, at that point, we were working with Weston, and we both adopted the same fees to make it easier for the new humane officer to have consistent rules. But that said, we're not making any adjustment to the license fee. We can still have that at any level we're willing to set it at. We also are not forgiving or reducing any of the tickets that people get issued for failure to license, but the late fee when they come to get the license is the only thing that would go back to the $5. And so for anyone that has paid that this year, it seemed fair to us as a finance committee to make those refunds. But we are not going to go out and forgive tickets if people have gotten tickets. That's what that is. So that's the only place where Ann thought that we ran afoul of the state regulation was in the late fee. So that's all this is changing.
I see that. Alder Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, some years back, I was once bitten quite deeply in my wallet for a late fee. How do I get my money back?
Is it this year?
I guess you can talk.
Not really kidding.
Attorney.
Can see Lois tomorrow and file a claim against the city.
Okay. Are we ready to vote, or are there any more questions? I think we're ready to vote.
Please vote. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you very much. All right, we are now on to the public comment and suggestions portion. This isn't really a public comment or a suggestion, but an acknowledgement. I think this is a nice bookend to what we discussed at the beginning of the meeting. But the Main Street, Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation awarded local community organizers Carmen Hain, Kaylee McCauley, Maya Medina, Christine Salm, Jackson Seeger, and Gwen Taylor with the Diversity and Inclusion Award for the large political demonstration and peaceful march commemorating George Floyd and Black Lives Matter from last year. So it's kind of a big deal that they were awarded this. They came by and showed this. You'll be able to see it hanging in our office. But I just want to acknowledge that we're super proud of the work that our community organizers are doing to make these important points. So thank you. Any public comments or suggestions? All right. Next up.
Move to adjourn.
Oh, but unfortunately, you're going to have to turn your agenda over because there's the CGI.
Withdraw.
The CGI thing. So I don't know if anybody would like to make a motion to go into closed session or a motion to.
You're going to read it?
Mayor, I would make a motion to accept the settlement as presented.
Okay, so we do have a motion to accept the settlement as presented. The attorney.
We have a proposed First Amendment to the development agreement, the terms of which we were going to discuss in closed session. We can do that in open session if you'd like to do that. I just have one or two questions and
Yeah,
some
this
direction.
is such a kind of a straightforward situation, if you will. I mean, not really controversial per se. So unless there's something sensitive that you think,
No.
I think we can handle it in open.
Okay, so we have a motion to discuss this in open. Do I have a second by anybody?
All right, so given the direction that was.
We don't have a second yet, so I was
sorry.
kind of waiting on.
Jump the gun.
Okay, we have a second by Tom. Alder
Don't we
Killian.
only need to vote to go in closed session, though? If we're going to stay in open, do we have to vote on that part?
Oh, I guess the motion was to accept the settlement.
Oh, okay.
And the second was also by Alder Killian, I'm assuming, to accept the settlement.
Sorry for the confusion, Madam Chair. I was mistaken and thought you were asking for a second to stay in open session, so I will withdraw that.
I mean, the second.
That is essentially what my motion is.
Then I will not withdraw it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
How about I pass out the resolutions, then you can get a motion in a second on that.
All right, I would like you to read the resolution and then maybe we'll motion in second.
Pass these down and I gotta give one.
Good, I didn't have it.
So I think we uploaded the resolution I was going to hand out during the closed session. I also have copies, but not enough hard copies to pass around, but I think they were uploaded to your iPads of the draft waiver and First Amendment. So essentially, and I believe CGI agreed with this, Brad's online, he can correct me if I'm wrong on any point, but basically the developer acknowledges that there were some original employment benchmarks in the original agreement. We waived that existing default. We acknowledge giving them earned forgiveness of $155,000 of the $200,000 loaned to them. That leaves a remaining $45,000 subject to either repayment or forgiveness at the rate of $15,000 a year over the next 3 years, as long as they meet the job maintenance requirement over the next 3 years of at least 50 full-time employees in a given compliance year. So the two questions I have are, do we want to define, and I know this sounds picky, but do we want to define a full-time employee as 40 hours a week? Include that in the definition, okay? Any objection to that?
Well, what's the legal definition of full-time employee?
It's whatever definition we want to give to it.
I mean, it's FTE. I mean.
Right, full-time employee.
Or equivalent. It's full-time equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have worked at places and it's called full-time equivalent, and full-time can be anything in my place of work at 30 hours and up.
Yeah,
Some
so-
can be 36, you
Right,
know, so
yeah.
I don't think we can say normal is, right? Not anymore.
No, I agree. I mean, outside counsel even asked, confirm how many hours you want to use to define FTE. So 40 was the suggestion. Does anybody have any objection to that?
Well, I mean, I just, in my experience, it's 32 has been the common cutoff.
All right, so have that discussion and tell me, direct me what you want to include in that definition. And then do you also want to include any hourly or salary minimums?
Okay.
No.
That's my first question.
Okay, so the question is posed. What does full-time FTE mean?
Well, the verbiage says FTE employees, I don't know, so, let's just, if we could, insert there, like, individual, 50 individual, FTE employees. So we're talking about 50 people, that are full-time employees, rather than, 70 people, and several of them are, less than full-time, but when you add them all up, they become FTE equivalent.
Right, and that
So-
example's in there if there are 2 employees or part-times that work 20 hours a week, but that's assuming again that 40 hours is a full-time week. Do you want that to be 32 hours and 2 part-time employees at
Well, I'm
16
just
hours
saying,
apiece?
in my experience, 32 was like, sort of like the common cutoff point, and it's fine with me. So, we should also include, though, reference to Wausau based employment.
It says working out of developers' Wausau, Wisconsin facilities. It's in
Okay.
there. Yep.
Okay.
Under the definition of FTE.
Okay.
And then they're going to average the number they're going to get a compliance year average instead of looking at one time during the year when they may have high employment or catch them at a bad time when there's low employment that might not be fair to them when they were hired during the year. So they've suggested a compliance year average be taken on October 1st and April 1st, but if you'd give me the authority to confirm with CGI that those dates are okay with them, if you like the concept and you're willing to go with different dates in the year, I would negotiate that with CGI as well. Those are my 2 questions, so I just need majority direction on those.
Sure.
two, and
Yes,
I'm
Alder
good.
Watson.
Did we discuss like having just the maximum per year? So it wasn't like, so over why can't you just do calendar year? Or why April to April? And is the resolution, is the revised development agreement somewhere that we can look at? Because this is just the resolution.
Yeah, I've got all this stuff. You want to see the development agreement?
Oh, I just wondered, because none of that's in that part, right? The time frame and all that sort of fun stuff.
I guess I'm not sure what your exact question is.
Oh, well, because you're saying April to April?
Where do you see that?
I don't know, didn't you just say that?
You said checking in with the number of employees, and is it
Oh,
October
yeah.
and April?
Yeah, just April 1 and October 1, those would be the dates. We'd check with them and say, how many employees do you have? And if it's described in the amendment, which you can't see.
Okay,
I've got 6 hard copies I can pass
Okay.
out if people want to look at it.
That's what I was asking.
They would pick 2 dates, I'm sorry, and then they'd say, okay, you had 55 employees on April 1, and you had 45 in October, so that averages out to 50, you're fine. We forgive $15,000. But I don't know if Sean had any discussions with CGI. I'm gonna have to confirm with them. That's just in our draft with blanks that I needed to discuss with you in closed session, which we're now having an open session. So it could be any dates, unless you're stuck with April 1 and October 1. Those were just 2 that were suggested by outside counsel. But can I agree with them on 2 different dates throughout the year to average their employment numbers to get an average for the compliance year?
Yes, please, because it really does come down to the year.
Right.
They have to say, within a year, did they
Right.
meet this benchmark?
Right, and so how do we measure that? On
And we
one
know
day of
that
the
any
year?
given year, you can have attrition.
Right.
And you
Right.
lose 3 people, and then you gain 4 people, so.
That's
yeah,
why I think an average is more fair.
That's absolutely true.
Why can't it be a max? If they've achieved 50 in one calendar year, they've met the agreement.
It can be anything the majority of you want this to say. That's why you're having this discussion.
I mean, because if they have 45 and then at the other time they count they have 50, then the average is not going to be
correct
50, so they're not going to be in compliance. But at one time, they did have 50. So I thought that was the original intent. It's just,
So if you want to give them the opportunity to tell us on any given 365 days of the year, oh, we hit 50 this day, you know, if you're okay with that,
No.
that's how
No.
we'll define compliance.
No, they have to maintain a level.
Right, right.
For the course of the year. But we discussed this in our previous meetings, that throughout the year, you can have natural attrition, you can have variation in your employment level. You can't guarantee that every single day you're going to have 50 people. But you better, by the end of the year, show that you averaged at least 50 people, because that's what this is all about. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. This is how you have to handle it.
so what, you do 2 days then? Or just?
I'm sorry?
So you only do you pick 2 days, and then you average those 2 days?
That's fine. I mean, it's fine with me. I don't care how you come to that, because on day number 365, I don't care if you added all the people you've had throughout the year and divided by 365, you know, to find, you know, what was your average for the year or whatever machinations. But sure, this makes total sense, and, you know, they just have to maintain those levels.
And if they don't, then they have to repay the 15,000 for that year. That's the clawback.
Right.
Yeah. So it can be any method you
I'm
want.
going to start calling on people based on their lights. So Alder Killian, you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we covered, I believe, some of this in ED, but what's the current employment stat there now? I thought so, too. Perhaps in the
I see people
60s?
going through their notes here.
Sean updated this memo before he left, but there's no date on it. I don't know if it was communicated to you. It says as of January of 2021, CGI had approximately 60 employees based out of its Wausau location. Though most of the staff was working remotely, the company moved its offices in early 2021 from the Dudley Tower to City Square. And they do have other recruitments out there to build on that.
Oh, okay. So, and then just one last clarification. So they can essentially, if they just reduce by 10 employees, they still get about $200,000 in forgiveness.
If they meet our compliance, if they meet the formula, whatever our compliance formula is on the days, day, months, end of the year, whatever you decide as the point at which you want to measure how many employees they have. Yes, if they meet whatever, however we define that, then that's forgiven for that year. So this takes 3 more years to forgive the remainder of the $200,000.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Alder Peckham.
Thank you. It might be the hour, but I'm not getting all this. Is 155,000 already been forgiven?
Yes.
Okay. And so that we're talking about 45,000, and would that be, you maintain 50 employees for the first year, you get 15,000?
Yes.
Okay. And then, I'm a little befuddled, but if, I guess whatever measurement they used to calculate their 60 current employees, we should stick with that to keep going with the 50, and I'm assuming that they would have used 40-hour weeks. Do we know that?
I don't. Do you, Brad? You don't know either? Yeah, and I don't even know what day in January we called them, but the 60 was whatever day in January we called them and confirmed that, but I can check and see if they're 40 full-time hours for a week, then that's the formula I'll adopt unless there's any objection to that.
That would be my suggestion. That'd be great. Let's vote.
Oh, well, we have somebody asking to vote, but we have 2 people's lights on, so I'm going to go ahead and call on Alder Wodinski.
Thank you. My question is, the number of employees that are required, do they have to be employed within a certain distance of our community, or can they be employed at the Wausau office but still live in Boise, Idaho?
I am going to assume that as long as they're employed as working out of the Wausau office, but they're living in Boise and they work remotely, that we're going to count them as a Wausau employee if they're hired by the Wausau office. If you want further requirements put on that, that they also have to live here or live within so many miles or radius of the Wausau office location, then that would be another term we'd want to add into this amendment. But again, we're going with the notes, as Tom mentioned earlier, from the last closed session, which was 3-year job maintenance requirement, maintain at least 50 jobs, report annually, and get a repayment basis based on 45,000 and claw back if they don't meet the employment requirement. And this draft does that, but there's room for changes based on what you want.
Okay, Alder Neal.
Well, you know, when the initial agreement, you know, the one that came into dispute, was made, the intent was to establish Wausau-based employees, so that we could have people living here, paying taxes here, spending their recreational money here, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the original intent. I would not like to lose that in this. So maybe I've not, you know, clearly communicated that in our meetings, but that should be it. They should not have people in Boise on the payroll, and that does nothing for Wausau. You know, I mean, that's something I think that needs to be hammered out with them, because that was the intent. You know, the original agreement was poorly written, and clawbacks were not addressed, you know, well. This agreement does have clawback language that I like, but these details, like, you know, 40 hours versus 32, I like that hammered out. But we want workers here. We're trying to get people jobs in Wausau. So that should be a point of that has to be verified.
Very good, then I need to know that, because the original development agreement, whether or not that was the intent, did just say we want you to expand, locate a physical office in Wausau and establish 200 jobs. It didn't require that the employees lived here as well as worked here.
Well, like I said,
But I
the language
understand
in the
the
original
importance of
agreement
it.
was
I
not a
understand.
great bunch of words.
All right, Alder Watson.
So, yeah, I'd like to see maybe in-person employees, you know, working in-office employees in the Wausau office location. But then I also think having a few more data points for an average would be better. You know, so like, if they take their monthly employment numbers and then divide it, like, average the month, you know, January through December, and then average them for 50, that would be my vote. Then, I mean, because picking 2 arbitrary dates, not saying that anybody would do this, but you're counting employees on April 1st and you're counting employees on October 1st, then you could really hire people a couple weeks before and they could be temp. I mean,
Right, it's more easily manipulated,
It
agreed.
is, but I mean, I know it's a lot of work to go through just to get 15 Gs, but, you know, I think it would be more solid.
Okay, Alder Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to mention, I just happened to watch a YouTube about people moving out of California and programmers moving to Idaho, of all places, that they're thinking that this is, so it is relevant. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alder Neal.
Well, just point of order, I guess, you know, my original motion was to accept the agreement as presented, and now we're talking all kinds of things that weren't really presented. So I wonder if we should not be voting on this tonight, if I should be pulling my motion back and asking for this to go back for some of these details to be hammered out with them. You know, I want to underscore an important thing. We are not trying to be punitive or playing hardball with this company. They're a valued business here. They've played in good faith with us. They kind of inherited the original agreement. It wasn't one that they made. They inherited it when they took over this business and weren't really aware of it until, you know, the question came up. So, I mean, I want to be a great, you know, partner with them, and just want to have these issues dealt with.
And that's why I wanted to have this
You bet.
discussion in closed session, because there are some details that need to
I
be
just don't
hammered
think
out.
sensitive enough for closed session, really. I mean, this is.
And that's fine.
This is the kind of thing we can discuss in open, I feel.
No, I don't have a problem with that, but I'm
Okay.
just saying maybe you aren't ready to vote on it tonight if that's the
Yeah.
feeling of the majority, and I'll go back and hammer out some more
Sure.
of these details and bring
All
it
right,
back.
I would rescind my motion pursuant to you just going ahead and,
Do you want it brought back to ED or directly to council?
I think you could come here.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a request to rescind the motion. Does the seconder also,
Gladly, yes.
okay, thank you. All right, so we don't have a live motion on the table. Do you have comments that you'd like to make?
Yes, exceedingly brief. Just that, I understand Alder Neal's position about not being punitive, but I think it's, and he had also stated earlier, which I certainly agree with, that the contract language was poorly written and anemic, but I don't think it's being punitive to expect that a deal is honored. So we just kind of see that a little different. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so you'll see this again, maybe next month. Okay, there is one last item on our agenda, and I'm seeing that the motion is being made by Wadensky. I do want to let you know that June 15th is the next Finance Committee and Council meeting, so put that on your calendar. It's not normal, I think, so. All right, we have a motion to adjourn. I'm assuming a second by Neil. All right, we're adjourned, everyone. Thank you.